Okay, good evening. The Charter Township of Plymouth Board of Trustees meeting for Tuesday, January 22nd, 2019 will come to order. Mr. Clerk, please take the roll.
Trustee Heitman.
Here.
Trustee Dempsey.
Present.
Clerk Vorba here. Trustee Dorshevitz. Here. Trustee Kermy.
Here.
Treasurer Clinton.
Here.
Supervisor Heisey.
Here.
All present. We have a quorum.
Thank you. Next is the Pledge of Allegiance, and tonight we have joining us Cub Scouts from Pack 1594, I believe. So if we could have all you guys and ladies please come forward and lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. Just get started whenever you're ready.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Thank you.
Well, that's what it's all about. Thank you, boys and girls, for joining us tonight, and your parents, too. I know it's a lot of work for the parents to haul everybody around and round them up and get them dressed and everything. So thanks to the parents as well. Okay, next is the approval of the agenda, and I move to approve tonight's agenda with the removal of agenda item F4. Is there a second? Second. Motion's made by Supervisor Heisey, seconded by Clerk Vorva. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Thank you.
For the benefit of the audience,
I will be making a comment. I will be making a comment.
Oh, okay.
Thank you. Next up is item D, approval of the consent agenda.
Supervisor.
Mr. Clerk.
I move for the approval of the consent agenda for Tuesday, January 8th, 2019.
Thank you. Motion's made by Clerk Vorva. Is there a second?
I have a comment.
Comment?
January 22nd.
If we are providing communications, resolutions, and reports, could we please make the numbers tie? Things like mutual aid shows 18 and the detail shows 19. Police department numbers are off. Just go down and make the numbers tie. That's all I ask. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
I have one comment on the bills.
The item, Chief Phillips, about that we're paying twice for the physicals, and we'd rather have them share it with their health insurance. And I know you said that it's a labor contract, so could we start some discussion for the next labor contract and maybe a memorandum of understanding? Because it's about $6,000 to $10,000 every time by paying twice for physicals. We, in other words, paying for it out of our pocket, $285,000, when the health insurance also pays for it. So we're getting double coverage.
Yeah, we can look at it in labor negotiations.
Okay. Okay, there's a motion. Was it seconded by Trustee Heitman?
Yes.
Was it? Okay. All those in favor of item D signify by saying aye.
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 Thank you. All right, tonight we've got a few items. I want to start with Trustee Dempsey because there is an item over there by the police and fire that I think Jack would like to explain to us.
Appreciate that, Mr. Supervisor. So Saturday is Statehood Day here in Michigan. It's the anniversary of the date upon which we became a state in the United States of America. And we have on loan here tonight a document from that year, 1837, when Michigan became a state. And the document's interesting for a number of reasons. Its age, as well as the fact that it has a signature of the governor of the state of Michigan, Stevens Thompson Mason, the boy governor, on that document you see there. So I encourage everyone, perhaps not during the meeting and the discussion, but during a break or afterwards, to take a look at it and also to think about this event this coming Saturday. It's very significant to us. We once were nothing, then we were a territory, now we're a state, and we have all the rights and privileges attendant to people who are citizens of the United States. Thanks.
Thank you. Well, in honor of Statehood Day, we have 3 former and 1 current state representative with us. So the 3 former state reps are myself, Jerry Vorva, and John Stewart, who is also here tonight. But we also have, for the first time, is our new state representative, Matt Kolazar. So Matt, if you could come up and just give us a brief update on what's going on in Lansing, what committees you're on, and whether or not you still like it.
After a week, so far so good. Good evening, everyone.
What microphone should he use?
He's using that one.
Should he pick it up?
Yeah, pick it up.
Pick it up. Got it.
Just pull it forward.
There we go.
Good.
First of all, I want to thank the board for having me this evening. Really appreciate you giving me the time. For those of you who I have not met yet, my name is Matt Kolazar. Again, I am the state representative for Plymouth Township, Plymouth City, Northville Township and City, and a sliver of Canton, the eastern sliver. Little update from Lansing. I'm going to be serving on the House Education and Health Policy Committees. The biggest thing that I want to make sure I convey to the board tonight is that I want to be an asset to the board. I want to make sure I'm a resource for all of you for any concerns that you want to see addressed up in Lansing, as well as any questions you have about any legislation that is going on up in Lansing as well. And that goes for the community as well. As a Plymouth Township resident, I take a lot of pride in this community, and I want to make sure that I serve you very well. Again, as far as things that they're talking about in Lansing, the big thing the speaker's made abundantly clear is he wants to tackle auto insurance reform. We know we pay very high auto insurance rates, and he wants to tackle that to get those down. So we're looking for bipartisan cooperation to get those rates down. In fact, they actually have a special committee just for lowering auto insurance rates. So that is one thing I know they're focusing on. The other thing is transparency in our government. At the state level, we rank dead last in transparency. And they want to have a bipartisan effort to make our government more transparent, because being 50th, there's really no excuse for it. So that's what's going on right now. And if you ever have any questions, be happy to talk to you. Thank you so much.
Okay, any questions for Matt?
Will you leave your business card for me, please?
I can do that. If I had one today, I came straight from Lansing because the roads are so bad and did not get a chance to stop. But I will make sure you have one, Mr. Kermey. I'll make absolutely sure.
The phone number is the same.
Yeah, it's the exact same phone number, and it's Matt Kolazar at house.mi.gov.
Okay, thank you, Matt. We're going to move on. We're coming up on public comments and questions, but I do want to make a statement regarding agenda item F4. This is the text amendment to the zoning ordinance, which was originally scheduled for tonight. We've received a lot of feedback from residents on this item, and we also have additional research and questions that we would like to ask of our staff and consultants on this particular item. So I decided to pull that item from the agenda earlier today, and the tentative plan is to have a study session on that topic, exclusively on that topic. We may add a couple other things, but we're going to focus mostly on that issue. That is scheduled for Tuesday, February 5th at 7 o'clock here at Township Hall, and that will be a study session. There will be no votes taken that night, and that will give us all a greater opportunity to flesh this out in more detail. Now, that being said, we're coming up on item E, public comments and questions. Whether or not you're here for that item F4 or not, we would always encourage public comments and questions on any matter in township government. There will also be another opportunity at the end of the meeting for public comments. We also encourage questions on individual agenda items as long as they are relevant and germane to that particular item before the board. We do ask that you limit your remarks to 3 minutes, and at this time I will take any questions or comments from the public. Representative Stewart, do you want to lead us off? Oh, okay.
John Stewart, 34-year resident, Lake Point subdivision. Former trustee, elected here 1988 to 1992. Always is good to refresh ourselves of what we have been through. The trustee Robert Dorashevitz test. I do my best to live my life measured by simple litmus tests. Do my personal choices. These are anything but simple. Do my personal choices, my public service, my treatment of others, represent a lifestyle that makes my children, my wife, my friends, and my God proud. Editorial by Robert Dorashevitz, August 24th, 2006. This was after a rather hideous primary that took place in Plymouth Township. And I do appreciate, and the words are true, and I Xerox number of copies. If anyone would like one, I'd be happy to do that. On another positive note, and I'll get to a negative note here, April 6th, there will be a combined Plymouth Community Band concert of 70 members and the Michigan Philharmonic of 35 to 40 members at Park. You can get a ticket for $20 to $30 and sit on a lovely plastic chair in the gymnasium and hear the brass section play Raiders of the Lost Ark and play Star Wars. Tickets are all sold out. It used to be a community thing that if you were a public servant, you sent $300 to the Plymouth Symphony. That was the pattern of Gerald Law 20 years ago as the state representative. It was the culture of our community. What are the choices of your culture? What do you do that makes you feel good? Now, for a rather negative comment. Up to date. Pipes broke. 13 offices with water in them at Park. PEP is canceled for tomorrow. Hundreds of children in collaboration with the Plymouth Y have been canceled. Over there, overseeing the rehabilitation and recovery and paying the $10,000 deductible at Park, Don Sonnen. So we have a rather unfortunate situation with a community asset. And I just wanted to bring everyone up to date. And knowing Mr. Howard, I'm sure he'll have an article on that. The Friends of the Rouge also had a temporary shutdown, and they will be back in operation tomorrow. As you know, they have the second floor. At least if you've not been there, please get off your gluteus maximus and go to the second floor of Park.
Okay.
So I'd like to thank you for this opportunity and hope we can go onward and forward.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, John.
John, I forgot all about this.
I want to know where Bob got that photo of himself
I
in
know,
that
I
article.
was a lot younger back then.
That's like a high school
Really
graduation.
good looking.
Yeah.
Used to
Yeah.
be, yeah.
It's not the years, it's the miles. All right, anyone else at this time under general public comments?
Mary Wydell, Plymouth Township resident, 12 years. My comments are related to the new criminal code ordinance that was read at the last township meeting, Resolution 2019-1-22-11. First, many of the items in this code already have laws against what this one covers, but there are a few proposals within it that are not supported by many citizens of Plymouth. This new law says to provide that open house parties are unlawful. Then I look for the definition of what this is within the law to find no answers except that it is two or more unrelated people gathered. Before passing this law, the term open house party needs more definition. If this is intended to be aimed at teen parties, then it should be written that way. As it is written, this law could bring the police to our homes if we are having a dinner party, a pool party, a 7-year-old birthday party, or just having a gathering of a few neighbors. Is this how we want our community to be? Constantly afraid of police showing up at our houses when we have a party or a gathering or a few friends over? No, we don't. And to bring this on out of the blue, close to 2 years after the teen party in my sub, is unacceptable. One question, what else has been done by the police or township to curb teen parties? New laws will have little, if any, impact on teen social behaviors. If you think this law will save lives, you're probably not right. Speaking of saving lives, it should start with the cars in my sub going up to 80 miles an hour during times when buses are picking up kids in the morning. I have yet to see a police presence in the morning since the speed study was performed in my neighborhood and recorded speeds from 45 to 80 miles per hour. Also, I'd like to comment on the breach of peace wording. It says, any person who shall make or assist in making any noise will be guilty of a misdemeanor. Any noise is quite broad, and I think this needs a little more definition. It can impact our ability to protest, our ability to picket, our ability to say what's on our minds. I do have concerns about even having the ability for folks within my parish, my church, to protest against abortion. And I know some of the board members are involved in my parish also. And I think it's time that residents are informed better on things like this and have more time to know that they are coming up instead of 2 board meetings and boom, 2 days later, it's a law and we're held to it.
Okay, your time is up. Thank you.
And I do find it slightly ironic that some of our justices and our freedoms are being almost taken away the day after we celebrate Martin Luther King's Day.
Thank you. Anyone else at this time?
Hello, my name is Eileen Coleman. I've been a resident of Plymouth for my whole life. I'm 55. My question was also about the breach of peace. It's way too vague. It can't be applied. It could be applied for just about anything. So perhaps if one of you can correspond with a constitutional lawyer who would understand the proper verbiage for how that should be worded, that should never be voted for at this point. That could, if that got into the wrong hands, that could be dangerous against people. We live in a free country, free speech, free right to protest. We actually can cause some disturbance sometimes. That's the beauty of our country. We can protest. We can talk about controversial issues. You can't have that in there. And if you do, you better reword it.
Thank you. Anyone else at this time?
Hello, I'm Kimberly Baker. I am a resident of Walnut Creek neighborhood in Plymouth Township. I'm also here to talk about Amendment 22 to Ordinance 1016. I believe it is overly broad and far-reaching. It is also being rushed through approvals by the Plymouth Township Board. And portions of this planned new law violate the United States Constitution. I'd like to point out 4 issues with this amendment. Section 7-2.13 is a violation of our First Amendment rights under the United States Constitution. We do have the right to assemble and to freedom of speech. Plymouth Township can enforce existing noise ordinances, and this law is not needed. Section 7-2.08G requires that all controlled substances be kept in their original prescription containers. We would be breaking the law if we put a daily prescription dose in a small pill box to carry in our pockets or our purses. Section 7-2.09 is overly broad and can be used as an avenue to violate our rights under the Fourth Amendment of the United States Constitution. Laws are already in place that make the use and possession of alcohol by minors illegal, and the use of illegal drugs is already illegal. This amendment is also unnecessary and overreaching. The preamble to this amendment states that open house parties are unlawful. You need to revise this language or it becomes a loophole. An open house is commonly known as a style of party where guests can come and go at any time between dedicated hours. Why do we want to make those illegal? The board should vote no on Amendment 22. I also ask that prior to making any additional changes to criminal codes, that the board publicize these proposed changes broadly and then allow at least 90 days for citizen review before voting on proposed new laws. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Good evening. My name is Patrick Arella. I've been a citizen and a resident of Canton and Plymouth since 1976, and I am speaking today on Resolution 2019. -01-22-01 in conjunction with application 236-1218 for the Plymouth Township Planning Commission that was reviewed on December 12, 2018. The reason why I'm bringing this to the attention of the board today in this public comment section is because not only was the process that was used to file this, the amendment and the application confusing, but when you try as a citizen to look through Plymouth Township's records of the actual event itself, if you go onto the website, you try to follow the agenda, you try to follow the minutes, you try to follow the video, there's inconsistencies and irregularities that make it virtually impossible to track. So to safeguard what has happened, I will share with Mr. Heisey and the rest of the board that we have filed a notice of intent to petition objecting to both Resolution 2019-01-22-01. We've also filed a notice of intent to petition objecting to the application of 236-118, the application that was submitted to the Plymouth Township Planning Commission. And again, I've been nominated by 15 residents of the Plymouth Commons Homeowners Association because I was available this evening to present this information. The petition for application 236-128 has already been filed with the clerk. And the reason we've decided to do this was because we don't really understand or know when the dates are applicable for the petition because of the commingling of the application for the amendment to the cluster housing Article 22 of the zoning ordinance and the application of the proposal to increase the density and strike the adjacent owner's notice provision that's already in Article 22. So in fear of missing something on the public notice and the information that's presented, I've been asked to come and read the notice into the record and read the petition.
I believe that providing us with those copies would be sufficient for tonight because you're rapidly running out of time.
Okay, very good. With regard to the both of these documents and their accompanying petitions, there was additional questions that I was asked to make on the record. And so,
okay, again, we are having a study session on Tuesday, February 5th at 7 o'clock, and all of your questions can be addressed at that time. So this is not a matter before the board tonight.
Okay, so
you have 3 more minutes at the end of the meeting.
You can come back at the end of the meeting for another 3 minutes.
Oh, sorry, is my time up as well?
Yeah, it's been up for a while.
Thank you.
Okay.
I appreciate your patience.
All right, thanks. All righty, anybody else? Yes, sir.
My name is Ron Rotoli. I've lived in Plymouth Township since 1977. Pat, if you could just help me hold something real quick. 3 minutes is quick, so I want to go fast. Thank you, Mr. Heisey, for considering to take the text amendments and study it. I have some concerns I raised at the planning meeting that it was not advertised properly. Aside from that, I sent you a bunch of legal stuff. I'm not a lawyer. I just want to visually show you my concern. I can't think of a better real estate example. Cite the name as monopoly. And monopoly is kind of like zoning. And Pat, if you can just hold that, appreciate it.
Speak into the microphone so we can...
if you can just hold it up straight. Basically, when you go to put a house on a property, they have to be even. 111, 222, 333. You can't go 411. It's kind of like zoning. It has to be all even. Less the fact that you can only put 4 max on any property. Now, if you look at some property is zoned low density, so maybe you could only have 1 square on a property. The first proposal that came across the desk that needs this amendment to pass is land zone for 18 houses. And so you put out 18 houses, you spread them out, it looks just like the subdivision that it's next to. You can go for the cluster housing option. Maybe there's some trees you want to save and you move the adjacency away. The adjacency in this amendment is reduced to nothing. So you move everything close together. Then the density is unlimited. This proposal asked for 78 houses. I need 4 monopoly sets to show you this. I had to use Legos. My kid's going to kill me. I'm sorry. This is what I'm concerned about. Lack of adjacency, lack of density, and I don't want the township that I've lived in since '77 to get sued. I'm very confused. If you in the Planning Commission can't agree, I know it's a negotiation, but a lot of people are going to get upset, and a lot of neighbors are going to get upset. And I think people are going to start going up Canton Center, Ann Arbor Road, North Territorial, buying up these properties with one house on it, try and get a little monopoly, and then put this together. I thank you for studying it. I really appreciate it. There's a lot of other stuff in there. I'm not a lawyer. I feel like I could take the bar exam on zoning now after what I've learned. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Pat Hanna, Plymouth Commons fantasy football winner. Who do you like, Rams or Patriots?
Patriots.
All right.
Go Pats.
Did you receive a written notice from Plymouth Township saying that things were changing?
So this is interesting. For the January meeting, people within 300 feet got notice. And so we heard about it. So I figured I'll just watch the December meeting so I can know how to respond. I'm watching the December meeting, and they're talking about it. And I'm like, how are you talking about it? You didn't notice anyone then. And then Mr. Heisey was very responsive. Laura Hall was very responsive. They said, we put it in the Eagle, and there was no parcel number. I said, okay. And I'm learning Michigan Zoning Enabling Act, it was required. There was no parcel number. And then, I don't know, December should have been noticed. I'm hoping that was no malintent, error, inexperience. I don't know. I think the whole process needs to start over again. I don't think you can do general and specific text amendments together.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you for the extra time.
And I got to tell you, that's one of the most intriguing and creative ways of explaining zoning that I've ever seen. So well done. Bob, did you have a comment? Or
Yeah, if I could make a couple comments about...
Because you are our representative to the Planning Commission.
On the Planning Commission. And if you guys get a chance, go back and watch that part of the meeting. I was in favor of pulling this tonight. I will speak for myself, and I think I can comfortably speak for most of the people on the Planning Commission, that there's no interest in putting that level of density on that property. There were a lot of good points raised. I think we probably had 50 residents or so that came out. There were a couple that said that they are within 300 feet that didn't get noticed. So we may have had some technical issues that have to be worked through. I think, as he had indicated, I think, this is going to take some negotiation. A couple people made some really great points I think you should listen to, and at some point it's going to have to get to the point where the Planning Commission is comfortable with the density.
Yeah, and there is no formal site application that has been made yet. So they recognize that if they want to do a cluster housing option in that area, that they would need to have the text amendment first. Mm-hmm. So again, the Planning Commission is going to have to review this probably at least, what do you think, twice? 2 more times? If it even gets to that point.
Yeah.
Okay.
Bob, I have a question of what you just said. It's not clear based on page 130 of the document that was today. It says the Planning Commission at their regular December 12th meeting held a public hearing and considered the proposed Article 22 amendment. No public comment was made. You said 50 people were there.
They were there in the January meeting.
All right.
Which was, last week? Yeah.
And it said after deliberation, then the Planning Commission recommended to send it on to the Board of Trustees. So on December 12th, it was okay.
Well, on December 12th, what we talked about, and I got to do this from memory, was that this text amendment, and I think I specifically asked the question, where did this come from? And Laura had indicated that some of the provisions in it are cleanup because our ordinance is old and maybe needs some refresh. But some of the requests came directly from the developer, and basically the developer has what I think is a conditional purchase agreement to buy that property based on they're getting their preliminary site plan approved. But like I said, they brought its concept. What they're basically planning to do is put in cluster homes and in the market targeted at they call them active adults, basically empty nesters, $600,000 and up homes, and but the density is far too great for my taste.
Okay.
Yeah, so.
No. Okay, well, I mean, we can hash this out later on, too. Okay, anybody else, because we're still under public comment? Mr. Van Esley.
Yes, I live at 12559 Holland Park Drive. My take on this is that the text amendment is just a back door to get extra density, whereas if somebody, the developer or petitioner, would have gone and wanted a rezoning, they would have been turned down or will be turned down. It's just an end run, and it's nothing more than trying to manipulate the Plymouth Township zoning ordinance. And I have experience with these people, and I would say that the Township of Plymouth does not want to be the next one on their list of people who get sued.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else? Yes, ma'am.
Hello, I'm Christy Van Esley, resident of Plymouth for 27 years, and I would like to yield my time to Patrick Arella.
Okay, this is not the United States Congress. Sometimes I wish it were, but it's not. It's not. Well, and he will have that opportunity at the end of the meeting, but we cannot be doing this tonight. I mean, it's not. This is not Congress, and so we cannot yield time to each other, or this will be your meeting and not ours. So we're going to work with you, okay? But you're going to have to wait till the end of the meeting. We'll give you some more time, okay?
Thank you.
Okay. All right, anybody else?
Well, for our work session, in the spirit of completed staff work, which this clearly wasn't done, is
I disagree.
The last date of the ordinance revision was probably in the last 5 years or less. This is not some old ordinance.
No, it's an ordinance that's been around for a while. And if you read the ordinance amendments that have been proposed, you could also make the argument that we are making cluster housing options more restrictive. Now, the density argument is one factor in this, and we're going to have that discussion. But there's also a lot more, I think, restrictions that are being placed on cluster housing options that are left to the that the Planning Commission and Zoning Board would have to resolve, and this board, if and when we get another one in the future. But cluster housing is not a new phenomenon in Plymouth Township, and we've had a lot of issues in recent years in their siting and their density arrangements, and we're trying to provide more clarity. It's just that we have a situation now where we have an applicant who is looking at a particular project, and I guess they're trying to call the question. So, anyone else? Public comments at this point? All righty. Let us move on. We have before us tonight another unique item. This is a matter of first impression, I think, for this board. It is what's known as a sale. The Independence Village, located on Northville Road, is looking to be acquired by another company called Great Lakes Senior Living Communities, LLC. And Bob, if you can get that up on the screen when you're ready. But Great Lakes Senior Living Communities is a nonprofit 501c3, which is in the process of acquiring Independence Village. This acquisition is part of a multi-state transaction that would allow the Arizona Industrial Development Authority to issue tax-exempt private activity bonds to cover the costs of acquiring the Independence Village of Plymouth property. The Internal Revenue Code requires that issuance of these bonds must be approved by the issuing authority, which is the Arizona Industrial Development Authority, and each governmental unit having jurisdiction over the area in which the facility is located, which would be, in our case, Plymouth Township. Approval by the governing authority cannot occur until such time as a notice of public hearing has been published and a public hearing is held. So, in order to accommodate the request by the applicant, we have published a public notice in the newspaper of record that was done in conformity with the 14-day notice requirement. So tonight we're going to have a public hearing, and then the next agenda item would be to consider the bond application on behalf of Independence Village. So at this point, I have to follow procedure and open up a public hearing. It is 7:35 p.m., so I move to open the public hearing. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Trustee Heitman. Mr. Clerk, please take the roll.
Supervisor Heisey?
Yes.
Treasurer Clinton?
Yes.
Trustee Kermy?
Yes.
Trustee Dorshevitz?
Yes.
Clerk Vorba, yes. Trustee Dempsey?
Okay.
Trustee Dempsey has requested to be...
Yeah, I got multiple motions going on right now. So can you vote no? You want to vote no on the public hearing, and then we'll address your issue afterwards? That's good. I think that's fair. Okay.
No.
Trustee Heitman?
Yes.
Is that everybody?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
All right, so we are now holding a public hearing at 7:36 p.m. on the application from Independence Village. So at this time, anyone here would like to comment on this? Independence Village people? Village people? No.
The village people.
You came all this way. I don't want you to feel shortchanged. Just pick up that mic and state your name for the record, please.
It's not put on.
You had it, Dave. Nope, you had it. It was green.
Just got to wait a second.
There
you go.
Yeah.
Thank you. My name is Eric McLaughlin. I'm a member with the law firm of Dickinson Wright, a member of its municipal finance practice group. Thank you for having me here tonight, Supervisor Heisey, members of the board. My client, Great Lakes Senior Living Communities, LLC, as you said, is a 501c3 formed to acquire and operate senior care facilities across the country. They're in the process of acquiring 8 total facilities, 2 in Ohio, 6 in Michigan. The other facilities in Michigan are in Midland, Grand Ledge, White Lake, Oxford, and Bear Creek up near Petoskey. The facility here in Plymouth is 209 units. It provides independent living services to seniors at its facility here in Plymouth. And it's looking to finance that acquisition. So it's going to issue the bonds to the AZIDA. They're going to be tax-exempt bonds. And as Mr. Heisey alluded to, the tax code requires certain requirements to be met, such as public notice, this hearing, the issuer's approval, and host jurisdiction approval. No new construction is expected at the facility. The total bond issue is going to be approximately $400 million. $59,500,000 of that will be allocated to the acquisition of the facility here in Plymouth. The approval that we're seeking tonight is not an approval to actually issue the bonds by this township. It's just an approval to allow the bonds to be issued, to allow the financing to proceed on a tax-exempt basis. Essentially, you'd be allowing Great Lakes to access the federal tax subsidy. The approval would not obligate the township in any way to pay any portion of the debt service, doesn't pledge the township's full faith and credit, doesn't hit the township's debt limit. And finally, the approval doesn't constitute a finding of this township board as to Arizona Industrial Development Authority's compliance with tax law or Great Lakes compliance with tax law. After the purchase, the current management company is expected to remain on as the manager, so as far as the residents and the quality of care is concerned, it's expected to be continuous. There should be no change noticed by the residents. And finally, the single-member parent company corporation of Great Lakes has provided the township with a letter stating that it will not claim an exemption from property tax collection after the transaction.
And we do have copies of that letter in both the public hearing portion of the agenda and in the resolution portion as well, just for your records, because that's very, very important to us. Okay, any questions for the applicant from the board?
Yes.
Yes, sir.
Will you explain the current ownership and what is the 501c3 that is based in Arizona? Tell me more background, please.
Well, as far as the current ownership structure, I defer to Andrew Kilbride, who is a member of the management company now. He can explain that current ownership structure. The Arizona Industrial Development Authority is a 501c3 corporation formed under Arizona law, specifically for the purpose of issuing bonds and loaning the proceeds to various qualified users of those bond proceeds.
So they will not operate this business?
No, they will not. It's simply a conduit issuer. They issue bonds, loan the proceeds to a borrower.
Okay, will the property in the end, who will the owner be, and are they a private corporation?
The owner will be Great Lakes Senior Living Communities.
And what are they?
They're an LLC. It's a limited liability company.
And who's the ownership?
Provident Resources Group, Incorporated. It's a Georgia nonprofit corporation.
Well, it seems like a very convoluted way to get tax-exempt bonds. Anyway, let's hear who the current ownership is.
Yeah, hi, I'm Andrew Kilbride. I'm here from CSIG. The current ownership group is Welltower Incorporated, which is a publicly traded real estate investment trust. We're the operator of the community, as we have been since, I think it's going on 20 years. I think we just had our 20-year anniversary. And I represent Senior Village Management, which is a wholly owned subsidiary of our company. So we are the tenant today. Welltower is our landlord. We were fortunate enough to be in the conversation when they approached us about selling the community to Provident Resource Group, or to anyone, actually. And one of our requests was we wanted to remain in place. We have over 100 employees that we've employed for the last 20 years. We wanted them to remain in place, and then also, importantly, the residents, and have no interruption of care to the residents. And so we were part of the discussion. We didn't have a lot of leverage in that discussion, but I think for us, we were happy to know that it's a 501c3 whose mission, part of their mission is serving seniors. And so with these bonds, we have a long-term contract with the new owner, if this transaction takes place, to continue that care and continue to employ our employees.
All right, we had something similar to this in the last couple of years with USA Hockey, which is a nonprofit. Well, they turned around and sought, they're paying taxes, sought to have their property substantially reduced in value to reduce their property taxes. And so now we're expending legal funds to defend that. So what is your intention? Matt, you're gone. I guess the other gentleman that's representing the client.
To be the operator?
We are going to continue to be the operator, and we've spoken with Provident and their counsel, and they won't be seeking a property tax exemption. I'm not an attorney, but been involved in these conversations, and I think today we're very comfortable and hope that will continue. And they've given us every assurance that they do that. And operating the property and being a resident of the community is important to us that they give us those assurances. I don't know if you want to comment.
But you still could say your property is worth, instead of the $59 million or whatever you're paying, is going to be worth $25 million, and then you'll come back and seek a substantial reduction in your value, and then the taxable value will go down. Well, the SEV and taxable value. So
But
maybe
anybody could do that.
Pardon?
Anybody could do that.
Yeah, we
Right.
could do that with our own homes.
Right, but my point is, well, the taxpayers are subsidizing this with bonds that are municipal tax-free. So it's a...
I just turned your attention to the letter from Provident Resources Group. At the end, they just say that they will not apply or otherwise claim an exemption from the collection of property taxes under the Property Tax Act with respect to the community. So, I mean, should be incorporated in all of these documents for future reference. I know the USA Hockey situation is a little different because they are operating a for-profit restaurant on site, and they provide other for-profit operations at the facility. So it's a little bit more cloudy there, but hopefully we will not have this situation with you. Any other questions or comments from the board? Comments or questions from the public? It's a public hearing. So.
I just had a simple question. I'm just scratching my head a little bit trying to understand why you would need our approval for this.
It's part of the law. Sure, that's a fair question. It's one we've heard from all the other municipalities that we've been in. So simply put, just the tax code requires the approval in order for them to take advantage of the tax subsidy. But if you think about it in terms of when the township issues its own bonds, you have staff that's analyzing the project, coming up with the project, and figuring out what the community needs, and you're heavily involved in that process. In this process, because it's technically a private activity bond, you wouldn't be involved in that but for this provision of the tax code. So the answer to your question is two-part. The tax code requires it, and secondly, it's so that you have the opportunity to voice support, raise objections, or any other concerns you may have about the project, the issuance of the bonds, and the use of the proceeds in your jurisdiction.
Okay. Cool. Any other comments or questions from the board or from the audience? Hearing none, I would like to move to close the public hearing at 7:45 p.m. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Trustee Heitman. Mr. Clerk, please take the roll.
Trustee Dorshevitz?
Yes.
Clerk Vorba, yes. Trustee Kermy?
Yes.
Trustee Treasurer Clinton?
Yes.
Supervisor Heisey?
Yes.
Trustee Heitman?
Yes.
Trustee Dempsey?
Would you prefer that I vote no again?
Yeah.
No.
Okay. You just want to keep this going on all night, I know. All right. Speaking of Trustee Dempsey, I believe you also have something that you would like the board to consider at this time.
Yes, on both this item and the next one, I respectfully request that the board excuse me from voting on these two matters under MCL 42.7, subparagraph 6, and our Ethics Ordinance 1016, since I am affiliated with Dickinson Wright, and therefore I believe I have either an actual or a potential conflict of interest in voting on this matter on behalf of a client or against a client, on behalf of the township or against the township. So I would respectfully request to be excused by the unanimous consent of the board from voting on both items.
Is that a motion that you're making?
No, I think.
Or how do we do that, Mr. Clerk?
We'll make the motion. Someone from the board will make the motion to support, to do that, and to get a support. I make the motion that we excuse him from the vote for any potential conflict of interest.
So the motion's been made by Clerk Vorba to excuse Trustee Dempsey from item F2 specifically, or also F1, even though that's a done deal?
F1 and F2.
F1 and F2. Motion's been made by Clerk Vorba. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Trustee Heitman. I believe this requires a unanimous vote. Is that true?
That is correct.
All righty.
Supervisor Heisey?
Yes.
Trustee Dorshevitz?
Yes.
Treasurer Clinton?
Yes.
Trustee Kermy?
Yes.
Clerk Vorba? Yes. Trustee Heitman?
Yes.
Motion passed.
Okay, thank you.
I thank the board.
Thank you. Next is item F2. This is the Independence Village bond application. We've had the public hearing. We have a little bit more information before you regarding the resolution itself. Mr. Bennett, do you have any comments you'd like to make at this time?
The only thing I would say is there was a question is why the local government approval is required. It's a requirement of the Internal Revenue Code, Section 147F. It requires approval of both the governmental entity that issued the bonds and approval of the governmental entity wherein the facility is located. It requires a public hearing, which the board just had, and it requires consent of the board or a referendum of the township voters.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions from the board? Anyone from the public? All right. I need a motion on this item.
Mr. Supervisor.
Mr. Heitman.
I move to approve Resolution 2019-01-22-05, authorizing the local host jurisdiction approval of Great Lakes Senior Living Communities, LLC, issuance of tax-exempt bonds by the Arizona Industrial Development Authority to finance purchase of Independence Village of Plymouth based on the attached resolution and letter dated January 11, 2019 by Providence Resource Group.
Yes, thank you. And just to add that we are incorporating the attached letter dated January 11th by Providence Resource Group, which I did read a small portion of regarding the non-application for tax-exempt status. That motion's been made by Trustee Heitman, seconded by Clerk Vorba. Mr. Clerk, please take the roll.
Treasurer Clinton?
Yes.
Trustee Dorshevitz?
Yes.
Supervisor Heisey?
Yes.
Trustee Heitman?
Yes.
Clerk Vorba? Yes. Trustee Kermy?
Yes.
Motion passed.
Thank you very much, gentlemen. Have a good night. Good luck on the roads out there. Next is item F3. This is a contract with AVM Ventures for the management of Hilltop Golf Course. This was an item that was discussed by the board at our study session last week. The document before you tonight is what we were hoping for, which is a 99.9% completed copy, clean copy, no more changes unless there's some other insurance items that the lawyers want to work out. What is blank on there in front of you is the exhibits, because some of these exhibits require additional research and assessment of existing equipment and who owns what and who would be responsible for what, and those are things that we can work out with ADM in the days ahead. But none of those items would substantially modify the contract in any way, so I believe that the contract before you is ready for approval. We do have representatives here of ADM, Tony Mosconi and some of the people from his team. At this point, I'm open to questions either for Attorney Bennett or for Mosconi's folks. Any comments or questions by the board?
Will this contract, and both parties feel they can be successful with it? Is it workable? Do you feel comfortable?
Yeah, we feel very good about this contract.
And we can approve it today. It has to be subject to the attachments, or the attachments are not part of the contract?
The attachments are part of the contract, but the final package has to be subject to the approval of the township attorney. And really what we're talking about are exhibits dealing with asset ownership and the legal description of the site and a couple other things.
Okay, you ready?
I'm sorry, is this general?
Yeah, this is, yep.
So I believe, Mr. Treasurer, you had indicated you would do a calculation of what this contract would have done if it had been agreed to a certain number of years ago.
I did.
Can you tell us what the results of that is?
Yeah. I did send that to everybody's inbox last week, but for the benefit of the rest of the crowd, I went back and looked for the previous 3 years what would have been the financial impact under this financial scenario versus the scenario that we were under with Billy Casper Golf. Back in 2015, which was a very good year for Hilltop Golf Course, we would have been negative about $7,000. This would have been a worse contract by about $7,000. Going into 2016, this contract would have been better by $22,000. If my memory serves me correctly, and in 2017, this contract would have been better by $79,000.
79.
Yeah. $79,000, correct. We have not received the final 2018 financials from Billy Casper Golf, but based upon the run rate, my projection is it's going to be very close to the 2016 performance, would put us at roughly the $20,000 to $25,000 to the good. So in my opinion, this is the model that we have in place is superior to the one that we've had in place over the previous number of years. It's superior to what Billy Casper recommended for this contract negotiation for their response to the RFP. And I'm confident from what I've heard from AVM that I think we're going to be more aggressive in terms of increasing revenue and decreasing costs. So I think this is going to be a positive contract for all parties involved.
Nice analysis too, Mark. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks.
Just on the issue of the township's obligations to make capital improvements, Mr. Bennett, there's no such requirement in this contract, if I understand that right?
No, what the contract calls for is for the first year, AVM is going to make specified capital improvements. After the first year, all capital improvements will be funded by the township. However, the township has ultimate say on whether or not to pursue those capital improvements.
So that could include no capital improvements.
Exactly.
All right. And then my last item, I guess, is I'm still concerned about the length of this. However, I notice if we could turn to page 13, paragraph 19C, language has been added that says that if
Sorry.
That's all right.
It's PDF page 114. Got it.
Yes, 114. So right there, that we have this ability, and ADM has agreed to a duty to negotiate in good faith revisions if we decide to implement portions of or all of the master plan that we worked on that our consultant provided. So I interpret this to mean that if things do not improve and we have to make changes such as going to a 9-hole course or something else, that ADM has an obligation to negotiate with us on that. Am I correct, Mr. Bennett?
Yes.
Any other comments or questions by the board? Any comments or questions by the public? Very good. Mr. Kermey, would you like to make the motion?
Before I go, what date do you think that they will be in the building, they being the new operator?
I believe before the end of March. We are going to have a smooth transition with Billy Casper. They've been very cooperative and professional, and I believe that ADM will be is already working with them. You know, assuming this contract is approved tonight, that they're going to be sharing things like the website and dealing with some of the other league issues that need to be addressed. But we're expecting a smooth transition, and I think that ADM will be largely in the facility by late February, certainly no later than March. So February, but it's moving along well.
This proposed amendment is the way we want it, or you need anything else added to it?
No.
All right. I move that the Board of Trustees approve Resolution 2019-01-22-06, authorizing the supervisor and clerk to sign the attached contract with AVM Ventures, Inc. for the management of Hilltop Golf Course, subject to final approval by the township attorney.
Second.
Let me make one change to that motion, because the name of the company, is it AMV or AVM? AVM. Okay.
So it's correct, AVM?
Yes.
Yeah, it's incorrect on the motion.
Victor, Mary.
No, that's what it
No.
says on the motion.
It's right on the motion, but it's wrong in the documentation.
Oh, the contract says AMV.
Yeah.
Oh.
So it's transposed.
Yes.
Is that what's happened?
Yes.
Well, it's ADM Ventures,
Parentheses.
AKA AMV. Is that the way you want it? Okay, so the motion is with
Mr. Supervisor?
ADM Ventures.
May I interject one thing?
Yes.
Prior to the time we finished this contract, I did a final proof and revision, and there are 3 minor revisions that were agreed to between AVM's attorney or AMV's attorney and me. And those will be included in the final contract that is signed.
What is the real name?
Okay, so who are we doing business with here? Is it ADM Ventures, Inc.? Is that what we want on the resolution?
ADM.
Apple, dog, Mary?
Copy that. All right, so Chuck, it's understood that this is with ADM Ventures, Inc.
Okay, so we're going to change the proposed
That's all.
to be AD as in dog, M as in Mary Ventures. Right?
Okay. Have you finished the rest of the motion, though?
Yes.
Yes, I did.
Okay, very good. Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Clerk Vorva. Mr. Clerk, please take the roll.
Clerk Vorva, yes. Trustee Kermey.
Yes.
Treasurer Clinton.
Yes.
Trustee Heitman.
Yes.
Trustee Dorshevitz.
Yes.
Trustee Dempsey.
Yes.
Supervisor Heisey.
Yes.
Motion passed.
Thank you. Okay, very good. Next up is item F5. This is a contract for the CityWorks data management system. Patrick, everybody's here to see you tonight, so it's humor. Is there anybody here from CityWorks? Or is that like a real?
Somebody from GHD.
GHD, sorry, yeah, I'm confused. Okay. It's not ADM or anything like that. We got that structured out. Yeah, okay. All right, Patrick, the floor is yours.
Okay, good evening. As a result of the township's SAW grant, the Department of Public Works developed an asset management plan for the township's sanitary sewer infrastructure. And before I get into it, I want to make sure everyone's on the same page as to how I'm defining asset management. Asset management is a body of management practices that seeks to minimize the total life cycle cost of an asset. And we try to do this in an environment of limited resources, meeting the levels of service required by the stakeholders, the customers, the regulators, at an acceptable level of risk. So that's how I'm defining asset management. It's a body of management practices. Now, a computerized maintenance management system, this is otherwise known as a CMMS. It's a commonly used tool in the water and sewer field. And it's a tool used by municipalities and also large corporations or any corporation to implement asset management. So just because somebody has a CMMS doesn't mean they have asset management. This is a tool that they use to implement the program. And in short, again, a CMMS is a software system, and it's used to help manage the maintenance and any other related work that's performed on the asset. And like I said, we were fortunate under the SAW grant to acquire a CMMS called CityWorks. And the intent for the Department of Public Works is to use CityWorks to basically efficiently receive, track resident inquiries, create, schedule work orders, record inspections, tests, samples, and track resource usage and applicable reports. In other words, it's to manage all the maintenance, whether it's preventative maintenance, scheduled maintenance, or reactive maintenance that stems from a resident or a problem. It's all maintenance performed on the sewer infrastructure will be managed through this automatic system, this electronic system. And also of note is that the software, and this is important, can be deployed for both office and mobile environments using tablets and laptops. So in other words, our field personnel today still use pen and paper. We still receive faxes from the office here to the DPW building with work assignments. So it's to get away from the paper and the pen and the paper filing and the fax machine, and to have everything through the cloud, electronically, electronically through the computer.
I understand that our DPW staff use their own private cell phones to take pictures and gather data. I've been told.
Yes. Well, unfortunately, they have township-issued phones. They're not smartphones. And that would be a policy decision to give them smartphones. But right now, since they don't have smartphones, they end up using their personal phone to take pictures and send email to the township hall. In this system, we're not thinking at this point to have the system. It can be operated through a smartphone and a mobile device. Right now, we're planning iPads and tablets and laptops to get the force to be more mobile. So implementation of CityWorks requires two phases. And phase one was completed late last year under the SAW grant, and it pertained to configuring the system for the wastewater assets, and only the wastewater assets, because that was what was eligible under the SAW grant. Phase two is this is the matter before you tonight. Phase two hasn't been performed yet, and it and it pertains to configuring the system for the water assets. And user training. So the water assets and user trainings. We didn't think it made sense to roll out the product and have our staff use it at this point because it only has the wastewater assets as part of the system. We want to get the water included so we can use it for all water and sewer maintenance work. The consultant firm GHD is recommended tonight to assist the township in implementing Phase 2. GHD was the lead consultant for Phase 1 implementation. They were also the lead consultant for the development of the asset management plan. And again, the SAW grant was a major project, lasted 2.5 years. So they have township experience. I think it was a very successful project. They're familiar with the department. They're familiar with the workflow, the business practices of the DPW. And they've done they've helped us achieve Phase 1 implementation. And we have 2 representatives from GHD tonight. The vice president of the Michigan office is here tonight. The project manager that I'll be working close with, Matt Lamb, unfortunately was out of town tonight, but I'll continue the working relationship with him under Phase 2. The scope of work and the cost are outlined in GHD's proposal. Again, Phase 2 tasks are similar to Phase 1, but they pertain to the water assets. And as in Phase 1, the review and update, and there's some reconfiguration of the township GIS system will be required. For example, in Phase 1, the sewer data, including the CCTV videos and data, were updated and uploaded in the township's GIS. And I emphasize the GIS because that's where CityWorks is unique among the CMMSs. CityWorks, in that it is embedded with Esri's ArcGIS technology. The software is actually built on the Esri GIS platform. Therefore, we can leverage our GIS system going forward with CityWorks. CityWorks will use the geo database of the GIS as the official register of assets. So in other words, CityWorks doesn't have separate templates, separate forms, separate databases that need to be synchronized or linked into the GIS. They're actually a partner with Esri, ArcGIS, in that it works hand in hand. It's fully embedded and integrated with the GIS, which was a strong characteristic of the software, is why we went for a CityWorks program under the SAW grant. Again, this is to implement the CMMS. I do want to make note that implementing Phase 2 and getting the water assets, this is not the same. We don't have a water asset management plan like we do in wastewater. That wastewater asset management plan was under the grant. It was a $2 million endeavor. However, now that we can focus on a water asset management program, this would be like the first step, and we would have to take relative baby steps to get a water asset management plan program similar to what we have now for the wastewater. So this would be a good first step to lay the foundation for a water asset management plan, is to get this implemented. So again, we have Mr. Scott Anamowski of GHD along with Alex Madia, who was working hand in hand under Phase 1 under the SAW grant. If you have any questions, we can try to answer them tonight, but the request before the board is to approve Phase 2 with GHD implementing it on behalf of the township.
Okay, Patrick, let me ask you one question. Is the $50,000 appropriation tonight, is this going to be a recurring thing every year? Is this a one-time deal, or do we have to pay an annual fee of some sort to keep this moving forward?
This $50,000 is to get the system up and running and configured for the water and sewer assets. Going forward, there are licensees that are associated with the new software that we will have to pay on an annual basis, including GIS. So there will be system software licensees that will be a recurring cost. As far as this major task of implementing it, I don't envision a similar project next year because it will be live. We will be using it hopefully in the field. There may be time to time where we will, depending, we may have to do an update of some degree or a module of some unforeseen task, but no.
So we're not looking at $50,000 a year.
Correct, with
forever.
a consultant to do another implementation every year, no.
Another question, can this be used in conjunction with other municipal assets like roads, sidewalks, other infrastructure?
It can, but that would take another reconfiguration and another, yes, it can. CityWorks can be used for any type of program. You know, some municipalities have roads in it. You can do anything, street signs or,
I mean, I know we don't do roads, but it would be, I think it might be helpful in the future for sidewalks and things like that we do have control over.
Yes, and again, it's embedded in the GIS, so whatever you do in the GIS can be seamlessly in the CityWorks.
So Patrick, this $50,000, this is really to configure the CityWorks software, to convert all of the assets for the water system into the system.
Yes.
And then provide the training on how to use it.
And the training, correct.
So we'll have a complete inventory of all our wastewater and all of our water assets now converted into this new system.
Correct.
Sounds like the only difference between the wastewater and the water assets will be we won't have done an inspection of all the assets. We'll have an inventory of the assets, but not an inspection to understand what the current state of it is and when it'll have to be replaced, et cetera, et cetera.
That's correct.
Fair assessment? Okay.
But we, again, in regard to the assets, we have to, we have to put the registry in the CityWorks. There may be some nomenclature, schema put in.
Yeah.
And then the various water type workflow processes, like flushing hydrants, for example. You need a template for that, and then you need a procedure for that. And then there's another. You have to identify all the different types of maintenance work and activities and tasks associated with it. Make sure the forms and templates for those specific has to be into the system, and the materials, in regard to water infrastructure has to be put in, so we can track that going forward.
Do you expect?
But you're correct. We don't have any condition assessment.
How long do you expect this to take?
I think there was an estimate. I'm thinking at least 3 solid months to get it up and.
And you will be monitoring them on the progress and costs?
Yes, I mean I have to be intimately involved in this just because it's so hands-on going forward with our staff.
And we don't see any need for any overrun. I mean, $50,000 is a firm. Not to
it's not
exceed
to exceed
means not to
$50,000, and that was sort of assessed based on the level of work and required on the wastewater side. So I think it's a reasonable.
I've got 2 questions.
Budget.
Sorry, I've got 2 questions, Patrick.
Yes.
On page 148 here, we have the budget account number. I don't have them all memorized. So is this coming out of the water fund?
Yes, that's a water and sewer fund account.
Okay,
it's
not
the water
general
and sewer fund account. I can't remember what specific one it was. I think it may have been under the consultant engineer.
Okay. Then if we go to page 158 of the packet, which is the final page of the proposal, again, I'm not an engineer, so task 6. What is go live, please?
Go live is when we actually, it's actually when we give the force the laptops, the
using the
tablets, and if there's any technical assistance required within the first, month or whatever of actually using it.
All right, so it's not for the...
I believe that's what it's for,
Jack, I
but
can answer that. So go live is a term that you use in technology for software deployments. So if you're going to flip the switch, at 6 a.m., that's the go live.
And there are costs associated with doing that, apparently.
Typically, yes.
Okay.
So they think at 32 hours, but if you were doing like a major software implementation, a go live might happen, at 6 a.m. or 4 a.m. if you're converting systems, and it's called the go live.
Patrick, one question I have.
You know that, Mark?
Little bit, yeah.
Looks like your group is covered. How about the IT group here? Is there anything special for the IT group?
The township IT group?
Yeah.
Maybe just some configuration and firewall, because it's all cloud-based, right?
it's all cloud-based.
Just want to make sure we're covered and we don't get somebody down the road saying, well, gee, it cost me 100 hours. And as long as we've run it past and you guys are comfortable, I'm okay.
Okay, I have a couple of questions. Ritter GIS, is that included in here, or that's going to be another expenditure?
That's included in here. They're going to be a subcontractor to GHD.
All right, so they'll be paid through GHD.
Correct.
About what will the license fee be per year? Is it $10,000 or is it $1,000?
It will
Order of
be
magnitude.
somewhere, for CityWorks, it's somewhere around $15,000 to $20,000 a year.
Well, pretty expensive license.
And it's based on the number of users, the number of licensees, and how big our community is.
So please give me a quick outline. Tonight you're going to have a water main break. So when this is implemented, what would you do? How would you use this system? Water main break tonight.
A water main break tonight, those calls typically go into dispatch. So ideally, they would go out to the scene with their iPad, and they would take that with them to record their activities. Of course, their priority would be to fix the main, but their all the tasks and the time and the labor associated with that and the record would be documented on the iPad. And it's important to note because when they go out there, they're going to take out their iPad and they're going to, bam, see the GIS map, which is the aerial view with our infrastructure actually overlaid on it. So it helps them identify where to go, the asset ID number. They can tap on the asset and get a work history of what,
So if they had a break here 5 years ago, a 5 years ago break would show that they had already done a patch on that spot.
Correct. Yes, they would get all the attribute, all that work history for that asset by just taking out their iPad out to the scene. So yeah, that would be a tremendous benefit to have.
So in this contract, they're going to input some old records of repairs that have been made, or will start once it goes live? It won't go back from there.
That's a good question. We're going to try to capture what we can. I don't know the answer to that at this point. It depends on what electronic information we have in regard to the BSNA. I got a feeling, though, it won't be as comprehensive as we would like.
What kind of integration do you expect with, you had mentioned BSNA. I mean, are these going to be integrated now or what? BSNA is basically
not
the building.
really. We're going to use it more for the water bill registry, the addresses.
Right.
Because we don't have an up-to-date address on the GIS. So we'll use we'll get that information from the BSNA. But there will not be live back and forth between the BSNA and the City Works. What will happen from time to time when that water customer base gets updated every now and then, like it does. So every couple months, I envision we would take a download of that data and upload it into CityWorks. So that would be more of a frequent exercise that we would have to do, but there wouldn't be any integration or talking between the two software programs.
From a personnel standpoint, do you envision at some point down the road, is Plymouth Township going to have a part-time, hopefully not full-time, but a part-time GIS person in-house to help coordinate all this stuff? And I'm not putting you on the spot.
I believe, it's a serious consideration, especially with this type of system and our GIS. I think a GIS and a CityWorks administrator would be very wise, especially if we're going down this road. Because the GIS, it's going to require an update of our infrastructure. Sooner or later, we're going to have to do an update. And it's either get a consultant to do it, or we have somebody on staff that can administer and keep the system update as we go forward. Somebody that would be familiar with both systems, the GIS and the CityWorks. So, yes, I would be a proponent of that. Absolutely.
At what point do we coordinate with or integrate this with Watua's sewer data, or has that already been done? Or are they separate systems?
Well, the Watua, we'll have that infrastructure, that network on our system, so we can identify which pipes are Watua. But, the level of information we want to put in there in regard to the Watua system, I'm not sure if we need everything because they manage their own system. But at least we can have their network in here and have that asset identified, I think would be sufficient.
Okay. Any other questions from the board?
Just one, Patrick. That interactive map that GHD would show us, is that part of CityWorks?
That interactive map, correct. That was actually created on the GIS system.
Okay.
So that would be what the workforce would see, and you can make layers that would show different types of information overlaid on the aerial. Okay. Yes.
Just FYI, I got to sit in on a number of the GHD meetings when they were doing the SAW grant work, and number one, I think GHD was extremely impressive in terms of managing the project and the output as a result of the project. But one thing that was really cool was you could go into this interactive map and you could start drilling down by neighborhood, by street. You could look at every single pipe underneath the township, and it, even coming down to like a foot or 3 feet, and it would be coded, which I call a failure factor. In other words, how old is the pipe? What's the physical condition of the pipe? What happens if that pipe were to fail? It might fail and it wouldn't cause any impact to the township, or it might be underneath a hospital, which would cause a major. So every single foot of pipe was basically coded and categorized what the impact would be if it would fail, and what's the likelihood that will fail in the next 1 to 2 to 3 to 5 years. That's how the capital expenditure program was then developed. Here's the pipes that we have to fix immediately. Here's the ones that we have to fix in the next 2 years, 3 years, 5 years. It was a great work product, in my opinion, and the software was pretty cool.
Yes,
it's like playing SimCity.
And Patrick, at our last study session when we were talking about goals, we talked about asset management. And this is a big, what you're talking about tonight is a big part of that, especially for the underground utilities. Is that?
Yes, it is. And just real quick, Jack, on your $50,000, I actually had it in the budget for last year because I envisioned this would be coming up, but we didn't get to it last year. So it was already thought about and put into the budget.
Okay, any other questions or comments from the board or from the public? Very good. I need a motion.
Mr. Supervisor.
Mr. Clerk.
I move to approve Resolution 2019-01-22-08, authorizing GHD to perform the work in accordance with the attached proposal from GHD in an amount not to exceed $50,000 for completing City Works implementation.
Thank you. Motion's made by Clerk Vorva. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Second by Trustee Dempsey. Mr. Clerk, please take the roll.
Trustee Heitman.
Yes.
Clerk Vorva, yes. Treasurer Clinton.
Yes.
Trustee Kermy.
Yes.
Trustee Dempsey.
Yes.
Trustee Dorshevitz.
Yes.
Supervisor Heising.
Yes.
Motion passed.
Thank you very much, Patrick. Next is item F6. This is a proposal for the allocation of the 2018-19 Wayne County Local Road Improvement Funds to the Plymouth Notch, also known as the Litchfield Road Special Assessment District Project. In your agenda package is a letter dated March 26th of 2018 from Moore and Evans' office, awarding Plymouth Township $388,888 for the local Wayne County roads allocation. I verified with Wayne County officials last week that that money is still available to us as long as we execute an intergovernmental agreement with Wayne County, which would come before you at a later date. But I think we are all familiar with the Special Assessment District project on Litchfield Road and Litchfield Court, I believe. It is definitely one of the most expensive SAD projects per household that we have seen in some time. And it would be my recommendation to allocate the entire amount to the Litchfield Road SAD, assuming that they go forward with it. I mean, they could still back out, but the full amount would go to Litchfield. As you can see, it would. They're currently looking at roughly $27,300 per home for this special assessment district, and this would reduce it to $14,300 per home. It's still a ton of money, and we're just trying to assist the homeowners to absorb this cost, and hopefully the project will go forward. And this will be an incentive to make that project go forward as well. If the project does not go forward, I'll bring this matter back to you, and we've only got one other active SAD right now in the township for 2019, and that would be Rolling Oaks subdivision. And again, that project may still not occur as well. There's a lot of hoops that the neighborhood has to jump through to make these things happen. But we do have to signal our intent to Wayne County soon, because we're going to lose this money at the end of the year. And so we need to get working on a plan, and this is my proposed plan, and then giving me the authority to negotiate an intergovernmental agreement with the county for receipt of the funds, and that contract would come back to the board for final approval. Any questions?
What happens if neither SAD goes through? Does it revert to the county?
Well, I don't want it to revert to the county, so I guess my plan C at this point would be to allocate it to the General Drive Industrial SAD, which, as you may recall, we got how much, about $500,000 from the state of Michigan, from former Rep. Noble, to repave that road. And that project, we estimated at about $1.7 million. So the business owners along General Drive are also bearing a significant amount of that cost. So again, my plan C would be to allocate the money to General Drive, and it looks like that project is moving forward. But again, SAD projects are very tricky, and people do have the right to sign in to them, but they also have the right to pull out. And so you have to take them on their face, and but that would be my plan C.
Why give all the money to one instead of?
because of the phenomenal cost that these residents are looking at per household, I mean, it could be a deal breaker for them. And the road is in terrible condition. I do not know what happened in the authorization for this project. I think, I almost think equity demands that we provide assistance here, because I think the township and the county, I don't know what happened on the inspections, the design, the construction standards, but there is totally inadequate drainage. The subsurface conditions are no good. The road is busting up, and I'm sure it's even worse when you've got plows going over it too. I mean, this neighborhood, you literally in the spring, you're going to have chunks of concrete all over the easements.
It really is a bad road.
Bob, I guess just something else to consider. In the previous round of SADs that we did, we allocated according to the cost. In other words, if there was $1 million, last go around there was $750,000 from Wayne County. We allocated that $750,000 based upon how much each of the SADs spent. So if you spent half of all of the money that was spent, you got half of the contribution from Wayne County. So it was equitable from a percentage basis. The only other one in play right now is Rolling Oaks. We don't have their final cost estimates now, so I did a quick little back of the envelope, assuming that they would be the average of what our previous round of SADs was. And I'm anticipating roughly $4,000 per household there. If we gave it all to Litchfield, it would be $4,000 per household at Rolling Oaks. If we did it the way we have a precedence that were reallocated on a percentage basis, the Rolling Oaks would go down from 4,000 to 3,000. So in essence, each of the households in Litchfield would be being subsidized by Rolling Oaks to the tune of about $1,000 per household.
Is that equitable? I mean, it is that 30 people get all of the benefit? And this is a rhetorical question. 30 people are getting all of the benefit of this $388,000, right?
So Litchfield, if they got nothing, it would cost them $27,000 per house. If they got everything, it would cost them $14,000 per house. And if we split it equitably, my estimate would be that he'd be at about $20,000 per house. So Litchfield is either 27, 20, or 14, and Rolling Oaks is either 4,000 or 3,000.
I think it needs to be spread out more equitable, not just 30 people, if this is all the money we're getting. It says 30 units there. Is that what benefits mean?
Yeah.
Well, that's how the math works out anyway. 13,000 times 30 is 390.
Yeah. There's 30 homes in Litchfield and 162 in Rolling Oaks.
Okay.
Kurt, does Litchfield have to go back after this money would be allocated? Do they have to go back and say yes to the 14 now like they did to the 27?
I'm going to have Mr. Felrath answer that question.
Litchfield is actually under the preliminary engineering phase, so they didn't really get the, although they have a good idea, they didn't get the official cost estimate. So when we're done with preliminary engineering, we're going to meet with them again with the proposed fix and the proposed cost estimate, and they're going to want to know that cost estimate, whether or not how much, if any, of this funding is applied, because at that point they'll have to make a decision to go forward or not.
Patrick, do you remember how many out of the 30 voted or approved going
Litchfield,
forward the last time?
Litchfield, to get the process going and get preliminary engineering going, they were teetering at 50%. They were one or two.
But Rolling Oaks
owners,
was pretty, it was like 60, wasn't it?
Yes.
Or,
Yeah, Rolling Oaks had a more of a buffer, if you will. For this initial, they're both in the initial stages, really.
Okay, any questions or comments from the public on this item? All right, what's your pleasure, gentlemen? Is there a motion? Who, where? Oh, yes, sir.
You got to come up here so we can hear you clearly.
Yep.
My name is Mike Liguori, and I live on Litchfield, serving as the champion for this project. And yes, we are very close to, we're on the border in terms of we have enough to go forward with this, but it is a very tight vote. And the real issue that's come with our neighborhood is the cost. Looking at the 27,000, we were able to get enough residents to go forward to try to get this process going to see what we could do to get this road repaired, but it is an awful road. And even with the assistance, I believe that the 14,000 cost per household would really go a long way to making sure that this happens. And I think particularly with Treasurer Clinton's comment about Rolling Oaks in terms of the 4,000 and 3,000, it cannot compare to the costs that we're facing as a neighborhood. And just thank you very much for your time with this.
I mean, I think if this project doesn't go forward, Litchfield is going to be almost impassable. It's going to be gravel in some areas, and I think it also, it's going to diminish your property values. It's going to diminish your resale value, possibly your assessed value, and so I think and that reduces our tax that we can collect. Right. So really, I hate to use that word invest, but we're kind of investing in our own future here by making sure that your homes are sellable and retain their value.
And I think part of the process when we were going through this, I had talked to a couple of realtors who I know had done business within our neighborhood, and particularly the last realtor who sold a house in our neighborhood. And while they couldn't give me an exact number, they did indicate that probably at least a 5 to 7% devaluation of the house would take place based on this. And I think with the housing market, that's probably talking upwards of $30,000 per home in reduced housing and reduced value. So I concur. And we've got now, as you come in about the 4th, 5th houses into the neighborhood, even with as mild as the winter we've had, we're pretty much in crater conditions with the roads. I think there are actually a couple of spots where it's very hard to tell that there actually is a road. It's pretty much down to the dirt.
I'm not looking for a definitive answer to this, but is there a public safety or health issue with a residential dead-end road being in this kind of condition?
Well, it's definitely going to cause more wear and tear on police cars and fire engines. But as for, health emergency, we have dirt roads in the township. Point of fact, a dirt road would be better here because we could grade it. This road right now, you can't grade. There's literally nothing we could do. With our dirt roads in the community, we can grade them and make them more passable.
We've actually had, I think, serious discussions about maybe just returning this to gravel as an alternative. It's that bad.
And this is just for future reference. I'm kind of surprised that there's a 25% factor for the engineering and administrative costs for these projects. But I look forward to being educated on that.
Well, and this is part of the preliminary engineering work, so these numbers are best or worst case estimates depending on your point of view. All right, any other comments or questions from the board? I'm looking for a motion. Mr. Clerk.
Supervisor, I move to approve Resolution 2019-01-2209, authorizing the 2018-19 Wayne County Local Road Improvement Funds to the Plymouth Notch Litchfield Road Special Assessment District project in the amount of $388,888 and request that the supervisor negotiate an intergovernmental agreement with Wayne County for the receipt of the funds.
Thank you. Motion made by Clerk Vorva. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Trustee Heitman. Mr. Clerk, please take the roll.
Clerk Vorva, yes. Treasurer Clinton?
No.
Trustee Kermy?
No.
Trustee Heitman.
Yes.
Trustee Dorshevitz.
No.
Trustee Dempsey.
Yes.
Supervisor Heisey.
Yes.
Motion passed.
All right, next up is item F7. This is the prohibition of marijuana establishments ordinance. Mr. Bennett, do you have any further comments or questions on this?
I don't, but I'm ready if the board has any questions.
Any comments or questions from the board at this time? Any comments or questions from the public on this item?
There have been no changes?
No changes. Second reading.
Second reading.
Second reading. I move that we postpone it and take it to a study session.
Motion's been made to postpone by Trustee Kermy. Is there a second?
Second, I'd like to know why.
Because we're getting a lot of questions. We're getting a lot of questions. And, oh, this is on marijuana. Sorry.
This is marijuana.
Yeah, next one. All right.
Okay, then that motion is then that motion is withdrawn?
Yeah, withdrawn.
Okay. We really don't have a proposed resolution or motion for this, so I'm
Hang on
going
one second.
to,
It was in my old one. Hang on.
all right, I'm going
Not-
to, huh? I'm going to wing it.
You can use the last, now therefore be resolved.
All right, I move that the Board of Trustees of the Charter Township of Plymouth hereby officially introduce and approve the second reading of the Charter Township of Plymouth's prohibition of marijuana establishments ordinance.
Second.
Motion's been made by Supervisor Heisey, seconded by Clerk Vorva. This is also would be resolution number 2019-01-22-09. Is that correct?
No, 10.
10, sorry.
I have a couple of implementation questions.
Okay, hold on. So I've got a motion and it's second on the table. Mr. Kermy.
Who will enforce this or monitor it? Building department or police department? And then second is to clarify, this will be no facility of any kind having any actions, production, testing, whatever.
Correct. So this is going to be monitored in part by the police. It will be monitored in part by the building department, to some extent by the township attorney, but also by LARA, the state licensing and regulation agency, because this ordinance, if approved tonight, we have to send a copy of this to LARA. That will be registered in their files, which will, I believe, will make us effectively immune from any future applications by any marijuana providers, sellers, retailers, growers, wholesalers, no matter what. And then we will be on the permanent opt-out exemption list.
Yeah,
Fair enough?
What LARA is the entity that would license the establishments. Part of LARA's process in licensing the prospective establishments is to consult with the municipality wherein the facility would be located to determine whether or not the municipality has any reason to object to the license. By way of having the ordinance, the township would tell LARA, yes, we don't allow these by local ordinance, and this local ordinance is specifically allowed by the new law.
So no action will regularly have to be taken between us and LARA?
Probably. I mean, what's going to happen if LARA receives an application for somebody in Plymouth Township, they might contact the township and say, do you have a reason why we shouldn't issue this license? Then we could say, yeah, we have this ordinance. That would be the extent of it.
Do you expect this to be challenged by lawsuits?
Well, that's hard to say. Anybody who's got $200 can file a lawsuit alleging anything. But it is unequivocal and unambiguous in the ordinance, or pardon me, in the statute, that municipalities are allowed to do this.
And our neighbors have already all done it.
Yeah, I think virtually all of our neighbors have, including the city. So, any other comments or questions from the board, from the public? All right, Mr. Clerk, we're looking for a motion.
No,
Oh, we did the motion. I'm sorry. You're
we're
right.
looking for a roll call.
So roll call.
Supervisor Heisey?
Yes.
Treasurer Clinton?
Yes.
Trustee Kermy?
Yes.
Trustee Dorshevitz?
Yes.
Clerk Vorba, yes. Trustee Dempsey?
Yes.
Trustee Heitman?
Yes.
Motion passed.
Okay, thank you. Next up is item F8. This is Criminal Code Supplementation Ordinance, amendments to the Criminal Code. At this time, I would like our township attorney to respond to some of the comments and questions that were made here tonight and provide some clarification to the board. Thank you.
Thank you. First of all, I would like to say I appreciate a concerned and active citizenry. Concerned and active citizenry is necessary to protect our liberties. However, with respect to this particular ordinance, there were some apparent misinterpretations of certain provisions in here. With respect to the provision providing that prescribed controlled substances must be kept in their original packaging, I think there needs to be some clarification. First of all, the ordinance itself is limited to controlled substances. It does not mean all prescribed medications, such as blood sugar medication, blood pressure medication, cholesterol medication, antibiotics. None of those are controlled substances under Michigan law. Under Michigan law, the Department of Pharmacy decides what is a controlled substance. The criteria that they look at is, does this particular substance have a high potential or any potential for abuse? Another thing they look at is, does it have any medical value? And the third criteria they look at is, does it have any potential for physical or psychological addiction? If it does, those are deemed controlled substances. The seriousness of the substance is determined on where it's going to be placed in the schedules. The most serious controlled substances are Schedule 1 controlled substances. It moves down to Schedule 5. So if an item or if a prescribed drug is a controlled substance, then it should be kept in its original package, because possession of a controlled substance without a prescription is a felony under Michigan law. Again, it does not apply to your blood pressure pills, your cholesterol pills, your antibiotics, or other pills like that. It only applies to controlled substances. So,
and to clarify, if you're in possession of a controlled substance, it has to be in the prescription bottle.
well, not necessarily precisely that. What Michigan law says is that if you have a controlled substance, you must have received that controlled substance from a licensed doctor and distributed by a licensed pharmacy, and in a container that contains specific information with respect to that substance.
Okay. You just said it more lawyerly than I did.
Well, while you're in your house, it doesn't have to be in its pill box. Some people would, but if you have that outside of the pill box and you have a prescription, is that a felony? Probably not, but it would be a violation of the ordinance, which is a misdemeanor. I mean, whether or not the police officer or the prosecutor want to enforce that, if somebody brings in their prescription at the pretrial hearing, that would be another matter.
But if I'm carrying an opioid in my pocket and I can't prove that I have a prescription for that,
you're in violation of the law. It would be a felony.
Exactly.
Well, do you have with you the Schedule 1 through Schedule 5 list?
I have them.
You do?
Online here.
I'm sorry?
I have them online here.
Does it include something like Ambien or
Ambien is not listed as a controlled substance.
What about antidepressant medication?
No, they are not listed as controlled substances.
So can you give us more examples from what you have listed?
Sure.
Bear in mind that those schedules change.
Yeah.
I mean, these are changed by regulatory agencies, so I'm just trying to get a feel. Okay.
Marijuana was.
Well, it still is at the federal level.
That's
So
true. That's true.
How about Adderall?
Adderall is amphetamine, and that is a controlled substance.
I think the list is fairly long, isn't it?
There's many substances on the controlled substance list. I'll go to some control or some Schedule 4 controlled substances. That includes barbitol, diazepam, which is Valium. Some of these I can't pronounce. Lorazepam, mebutamate, meprobamate.
You're just making it up at this point.
I'm not making it up.
Those are just random syllables.
See, we need more doctors and less lawyers on this board.
If I was a pharmacist, I could pronounce these properly. Prazamapam, ethinamate. Those are some Schedule 4 controlled substances. I can give you some 5s and some 3s if you'd like. The most serious ones are on 1.
What are 5s?
5s are loperamide, not more than 200 milligrams of codeine, dihydrocodeine, not more than 100 milligrams of ethyl morphine, ephedrine,
Sinus?
I think that's a weight loss drug. And the amount of some substances depends on what schedule it is also. For example, possession of certain amounts of some opiates is a Schedule 2 as opposed to a Schedule 1.
Kevin, can I ask you a couple general questions?
Sure.
So if I understand correctly from our discussion at the last meeting, all of these ordinance changes that you're talking about, these are already state laws?
No, not all of them.
Okay.
Some of them are. Most of them are. Not all of them are. Before I get into that, may I go over, I'll get into the overview later.
Okay.
I also want to talk about open house parties. There were some concerns about that. The text of the document, or part of the ordinance itself, is what controls, not the heading. The heading is for convenience purposes. It is not for substantive purposes. And the substantive part of the open house parties ordinances prohibits somebody from knowingly allowing a minor to consume or possess alcoholic beverage at a social gathering within the premises, or knowingly allowing an individual to consume a controlled substance at a social gathering within that premises. However, it does not apply to controlled substances that are used pursuant to lawful prescription or by alcoholic beverages by a minor for religious purposes. The other part that I think it's important to note is the enforcement aspect of this. These ordinances do not allow police officers, and I don't think this would happen anyway, but since it came up, I'd like to address it. These ordinances do not allow police officers to storm in to people's houses without warrants. The law on entry into a home was set forth in Payton versus New York, the United States Supreme Court case in 1980. In that case, the Supreme Court stated that the physical entry of the home is the chief evil against which the wording of the Fourth Amendment is directed. And it states that warrantless searches are presumed unreasonable, especially entry into a house. So for a police or other law enforcement agency to gain access to a house, they would have to have a warrant. They can't go into somebody's house because they think something might be going on illegal in there. They would have to have a warrant. Of course, there are exceptions to that. The primary exception to that is the emergency aid, which is if a police officer has specific and articulable reasons to believe that a person inside the premises needs immediate medical aid, then the police officer can enter the premise for that purpose. But it's for law enforcement purposes. A police officer almost always cannot enter a house without a warrant, unless there's consent. Consent would be an exception to the warrant also. So the open house parties provision of this ordinance is basically to preclude people from having parties where minors are consuming alcoholic beverages or people are consuming controlled substances, which now would not include marijuana because the new law supersedes the public health code with respect to controlled substances. So it would have to be a controlled substance that was not prescribed, that's being used for recreational purposes. And for practical purposes, to enforce this, there would have to be some kind of disturbance or diversion whereby the police would be summoned to the premises.
In recent cases, we've had house parties where in excess of 300 to 400 kids have been there without adult supervision, sometimes with, but also without, and it has created a riotous conditions where minors are being harmed, where kids are drunk, completely intoxicated, property damage, both internal to the house and external to the property and surrounding areas. So it has been a problem in this township in the past and certainly in other jurisdictions. And also, too, we talked about this at our last meeting, that we're also concerned about the potential abuse of the Airbnb phenomenon, where you could have a house that's legitimately rented out to somebody in good faith, and then they turn around and maybe assign it to a third party, or they end up having a destructive party of some sort that would be in violation of this ordinance. And we've had a lot of residents complain about that, too.
And what this ordinance would do would be allow the township to hold the person responsible for that accountable.
So describe kind of an example, if you would, where so I'm in my house with another person and we're dancing to music, bad dancing, and can my neighbor call the cops and the cops come bursting through my door?
No. That would not even be a violation of the ordinance. The ordinance requires the owner or the person in charge of the premises to knowingly allow a minor to consume alcoholic beverages, or to knowingly allow any person to unlawfully use a controlled substance.
Would it be a violation? Excuse me.
But how do the cops know unless they go inside the house?
Well, that's an issue that could vary depending on the circumstances. In the event of a huge open house party where people are freely coming and going, usually the doors are open, it's going to be visible from the outside, and the police could say, "May I speak to the owner of the premises?" The owner or the person in charge could come to the door, and they could have a conversation with that person and say, "What's going on?" And then if there's a problem, they could say, "Hey, you got to make everybody leave. You're in violation of our ordinance."
Not that it makes it better, but is this ordinance similar to what Canton has right now?
It's very similar to what Canton has right now, and I think
not.
Canton has had it for many, many years. I've been prosecutor for Canton Township and Plymouth Township for almost 20 years, and this does not come up that often, but it does come up, and nobody has challenged it.
Okay. Are we still on the house party issue?
Yes.
Okay. Do you want to stay on that issue? Because I've got other questions.
Okay. I was going to address the disturbing the peace ordinance also.
Breach of peace, yeah.
Okay. Disturbing the peace.
What section was that again?
2.13.
Here it is.
Disturbing the peace. This is not, I mean, theoretically, could this be held to be a overbroad, impinging on a person's First Amendment rights? Yes, it could. But I need to explain some concepts with respect to overbreadth. Overbroad can mean on its face, the statute or ordinance on its face is overbroad, or it could mean it is overbroad as applied. The Supreme Court has drawn that distinction. What they have said in Broderick versus Oklahoma was that if a statute is substantially on its face overbroad, it's got to be real and substantial, judged in relation to the statute's plainly legitimate sweep, that it can be held to be overbroad facially, which means overbroad to the extent that it cannot be applied in any circumstance. The other concept is overbroad as applied to the facts of a specific case. In this case, if this ordinance was applied in a content-based manner, it may be subject to a violation of overbreadth. For example, the concern was protesting abortions. That would be a content-based enforcement of the law. It's enforced based on the person's content. What this law is aimed at is people in a party store or a gas station at 1 o'clock in the morning that are getting loud and obnoxious, arguing about change or something like that while there's other people waiting in line. Again, this is the same, substantially the same ordinance that Canton Township has had for 20 years. And again, I've been prosecuting for Canton Township and Plymouth Township for approximately 20 years. Nobody has challenged this ordinance, and it has not been applied in a manner to impinge upon a person's First Amendment rights.
Okay, let me bring you some history on the abortion issue. Your law firm, I think, was involved in this. At Our Lady of Good Counsel Church, sometime while Granholm was governor, this township paid out a settlement to 3 individuals because our police department suppressed a protest on the sidewalk at the complaint from the parish priests and parishioners. We paid out about $40,000. So tell me about how this will blend into that.
Okay, but I don't know any.
Do you remember the case?
I do not.
Your colleague defended us in it, and unfortunately we lost. But
no, I do not remember it.
When was that?
Oh, probably. I don't know. When did Granholm first get elected?
About 17 years ago.
Yeah, something like that. It was in the 2000s.
Yeah, early 2000s.
Lawsuits could be brought.
It was a First Amendment issue, is what we lost on.
Yeah, well, what lawsuits could be brought under a statute called 42 United States Code 1983. That statute provides that if a state or agency of the state, which would be the township, deprives a person of a constitutional right under the color of state or local law, then that could be a basis to award the aggrieved person money damages. To the extent that this breach of peace ordinance is used in a manner that deprives a person of their First Amendment rights, that could subject the township to exposure to a 1983 lawsuit. That is why people who enforce this ordinance must be especially circumspect to make sure that there is no content-based reasons to enforce this ordinance.
So what would apply if this room were packed with people were holding signs that were, you know, against the board, whatever the current board, and they were arrested? How would you characterize that?
Well, first of all, I would suggest that people not be arrested for exercising their First Amendment rights.
Mm-hmm. Well, I guess my question was, you would characterize that as applied.
If somebody was charged under those circumstances, and it wouldn't happen if I was looking at the warrant request, but if somebody was charged under those circumstances, it would be an as-applied charge, and it would probably prevail.
I would also remind the board that Shannon Price and Nancy Councilman tried to pass an ordinance in this town a couple years ago that would have made annoying or emails or texts that Facebook, social media, next door, that would be annoying or critical of the government in some way, that those would be against
I wish it would have passed.
a local ordinance. Well, the ACLU got involved real quick,
I remember
and
that well.
they shot it down as well they should. And so, you know, we're certainly not proposing anything like that here.
I believe we had picketers too, lots of them.
May I offer a practical issue also? While prosecuting over at 35th District Court, people are sometimes charged with other offenses that sound more egregious than breach of peace. For example, if somebody's charged with resisting and obstructing a police officer, or some other charges that sound worse than breach of peace. As a matter of plea bargaining, sometimes it's easier to resolve the case by offering them a plea to breach of peace, which is punishable by the same amount of money and the same term of probation. It just sounds less egregious, and that makes it more appealing to defendants to enter into the plea. Saves cases from going to trial.
So is there case law on this breach of peace under Michigan Supreme Court, Court of Appeals decisions?
The one case that I saw recently was Plymouth, it's not recent, Plymouth Township versus Hancock. That was a different ordinance, I think. I don't recall, it was a long time ago, but it was a breach of peace or disturbing the peace that, in that case, it was a neighbor dispute where one neighbor, an old man, was using the filthiest, vilest language against his female neighbor on a regular basis. The township charged Mr. Hancock with violation of the ordinance. I believe the district court held that the ordinance was unconstitutional. The circuit court upheld the district court. The Court of Appeals overruled both and held because the ordinance included the term reasonable, that set appropriate limits on the breadth of the ordinance. The defendant applied for leave to appeal with the Michigan Supreme Court. The Michigan Supreme Court denied leave, which means that the Court of Appeals opinion stands as good law. Now, there are some other ordinances that, when applied under different circumstances, for example, the cussing canoeist case, where a person was in a canoe and they fell over something and started yelling obscenities on a river that were heard by some people 100 feet away or 200 feet away, that person was charged. Well, in that case, that particular ordinance was either stricken down as, and it was a state statute, it wasn't an ordinance. It was either stricken down as unconstitutional on its face or unconstitutional as applied. So with this particular ordinance, yes, the township should take extremely circumspect measure in deciding who to charge under this. And if a person is exercising legitimate First Amendment rights, and there's a number of criteria to go into what's legitimate. Is it a public forum? Is it reasonable under the terms of the public forum? There's a whole panoply of questions that have to be answered in order to determine if it's First Amendment protected. But if it's even close, I would submit that this should not be used as a charging ordinance.
So, for example, we have, let's say we have a street corner demonstration at Haggerty and Ann Arbor Road, and there's 100 people there carrying signs, impeach the president or something like that.
No. If it's
so that's fine, but wait a minute. So if this group, though, now goes out into Ann Arbor Road and starts impeding traffic and beating on windshields and throwing objects at people, then...
That is not protected speech.
Right. Can I ask another question on relating to the ordinance?
Yes.
Can you tell us the procedural differences and advantages to trying these cases in district court as opposed to circuit court, and what options are available in the 35th district court? I don't care what goes on elsewhere. What are the advantages in the 35th district court, based on your years of practice in that court, for juvenile offenders and young offenders to have misdemeanors erased from their records, HIDA, deferred sentence programs? I mean, there's a variety of things that we offer. Could you elaborate on that? And how would that compare to going downtown to circuit court, where it would be a much different result?
Okay. First of all, with respect to juveniles, a person who's under 17 years of age is a juvenile for purposes of criminal law. So if a person who is under 17 years of age is charged with a crime, there's a special juvenile division over at 35th District Court. There is no conviction of a juvenile. It's called an adjudication. An adjudication is a sealed record. Person's juvenile records are not allowed to be accessed once that person turns 17 years of age or older. If a person is between 17 years of age and 24 years of age, or younger than 24, older than 17 but younger than 24, there's a program available called Holmes Youthful Trainee Act. The acronym is HIDA. HIDA is a program designed to allow people who make a mistake while they're young to not pay for that mistake the rest of their lives. HIDA, by its own terms, is not limited to being used one time. However, it is within a judge's discretion whether or not to accept a HIDA plea. At the 35th District Court, some judges will accept a HIDA plea if the person has other HIDA pleas. Some judges will not accept a HIDA plea if the person has other HIDA pleas. It's a matter of judicial discretion at that point. But we, as charging agency, the township, can offer a HIDA plea to people in that age group. Sometimes it's appropriate, sometimes it's not. For people who are charged with controlled substances offenses, there's a plea called 7411, which is Section 7411 of the Public Health Code. That is applicable to controlled substance-related offenses. If a person receives a controlled substance-related offense, and that's included in this ordinance, by the way, also, if a person has a controlled substance-related offense and it's a first offense, they can have their plea held aside while the person is on probation, and if they successfully complete probation, then the case is dismissed. There's another one that's generally applicable. It's called Statute 771.1, which allows a deferred sentence. It's the same concept, except it's available to all offenses that the township could charge, which are misdemeanors. Township has no jurisdiction to charge felonies. So locally, all of those options are available. With respect to the advantages of keeping it local, first of all, I think the police officers would like to keep it local. It keeps things here in our community as opposed to going downtown where they've got big fish to fry. And also, we also keep them within the jurisdiction of the probation department of 35th District Court, which is also local and can use our local concerns in implementing and fashioning appropriate probation. Also, the revenue, if somebody's charged, the money would go to the township. I mean, some of this, the cost would go to the state, but the fine itself would go to the township, not to the state, under the same charge.
And the township does not collect any fines or fees currently. Any money collected by the 35th District Court is being put back into the court.
Okay.
So they can cover OPEB and pension obligations with the state.
Okay.
Okay. Any other comments or questions by the board?
Yeah, Kevin, if you could get back to the general, let me just ask the questions one at a time. First, can you go through, Bob, if you can go up to the top of the document, and there's that whole section which is adopting by reference, and there's a whole list of laws that you adopt by reference.
Yes.
Can you help me understand what that means?
Sure.
What section again?
It would be section
2.00.
200.
What PDF page number?
174.
Yep, right there.
Okay. The township had adopted a number of state statutes in the penal code and some other codes by reference. What the Michigan General Township Law 41.181 states is that a township may adopt a provision of any state statute for which the maximum period of imprisonment is 93 days, or the Michigan Vehicle Code by reference in an adopting ordinance, which statute shall be clearly identified in the adopting ordinance. What I interpret that to mean is that the statute itself must be listed in the adopting ordinance. So what I did was I went through the Michigan Penal Code and some other Michigan codes to find misdemeanors that would be within the township's jurisdiction to enforce if they were adopted by reference. There was already a list of statutes that the township had previously adopted. I simply expanded upon those. So if there is an offense that's under state law, the police department would have the option of charging it locally rather than sending it to the Wayne County prosecutor.
So if I compare the new ordinance to the old ordinance, there were certain laws that you removed from the old ordinance and certain laws that you added to the new ordinance. There's roughly 30 new laws on that list. What was the criteria that you used to either add or remove them?
The criteria that I used with respect to adding them was seeing if they were a misdemeanor under the Michigan Penal Code. If they were a misdemeanor under the Penal Code and they weren't currently listed in the township's ordinance, I included them. With respect to the removal, some of the removals were simply logistical in nature. For example, if I adopted 471, before it said 471 subsection 2, I just adopted all of 471. I mean, there was nothing substantive taken out of there. It was basically administrative changes with respect to increasing the portions of the statute, the pre-existing statute, that the township could use.
Okay. So, Bob, if you can go up a little bit. Right there, thanks. So the language you added about 3 lines down, the fraudulent access to computers, computer systems, computer networks, etc., careless, reckless, or negligent use of firearms, that's all new language. And that's because those are all under state law misdemeanors?
Yes.
Okay. One you removed was the State Public Health Code, Public Act 368. That was in the old ordinance, and you removed that.
That's because we added section 208.
Okay. Public Act. Okay. Just some editorial things. If you could go back to that section, Bob.
Now, with respect to some of those acts, just so everything's clear, some of those acts are punishable by felony. Some of them are punishable by misdemeanor, so I only adopted the ones that were punishable by misdemeanor.
Okay. Yeah, that's what I really wanted to understand was what were the criteria that you used, because there was a lot of them, and I just started Googling and see what they were, and there didn't seem to be any rhyme or reason. But the common thread was that they were misdemeanors. If you go down a little bit, Bob, and I apologize for getting picky like this. The third line down, right in the middle, instead of saying 750-120B, it says 7750-120B. So you've got, right there, you've got one too many sevens.
Yes, there is.
Going down a little further, Bob, right near the bottom, the last line, instead of saying, the last line to the far right, instead of saying 752-794, it says 750-794, right there.
That should be, the bottom line should be 752. Those are firearm offenses.
Correct. So that should read 750 instead of 750.
It
Read
should
752 instead of 750.
The bottom one should read 752, correct.
Okay. Then if you can just scroll down a little more, Bob, just the paragraph numbers were wrong. I'm sorry, scroll down.
Yeah, A, B.
So you got 207, 208, keep going down.
C, D, E, F, G.
Then you have 209. And then it goes to 210. And then it goes back to 209.
Oh, boy.
So they were just misnumbered.
It is misnumbered.
Yes, that is misnumbered. That should be 211.
211's animal cruelty.
You're right. Thank you for catching that.
Yeah. And then just keep going down a little further, Bob. Then I didn't understand, after you get to the bottom of the, you get to 212, keep going down. 213, 214. Then why does it become section 3 after 214? Should that be 7-3.00?
No.
Okay.
No. Section 1 is the text of the ordinance. So that should, the first part should be titled Section 1, you're correct. Section Roman numeral 1. And that contains the VII numbers. And then after the VII numbers, there's the boilerplate provisions that are contained in any ordinance, which is penalty, repeal, severability, publication, savings clause, and effective date.
Okay, I got you, thanks. All right, that's all my questions, I appreciate it.
Okay, so there were some formatting and numbering issues that need to be changed. You're right.
Look at auto numbered and.
You might go back to the.
Careless is probably careless too.
Yes.
Okay. It's in 2.0.
Okay, so hold on. What you got there, Gary?
The 2.00, the criminal code, we talk about the carless. So
Got it.
they
Okay.
don't truly have cars. They're
Got it.
careless.
All right, Mr. Borba, any questions?
Yeah, and just a point from the police department, if I may. Are all of our police officers go to police academy? And in that police academy, do they all take classes on criminal law? You know, where they deal with constitutional issues. You know, Esposito. You know, Miranda, Terry stop, the whole litany of those things.
Yes, and we also do legal updates.
And they talk about application of how to identify, you know, constitutional issues.
Absolutely.
Now, most of our police officers, if not all of them, have criminal justice degrees. Is that not correct?
A majority.
Majority of them. And in those degrees, they have extensive study on criminal law, on constitutional law, and the like.
Correct.
Do they have regular updates when new laws come into effect, when new constitutional rulings come down, or even just refreshers on the older? Is that a work in progress that goes on annually?
We go to legal update every year. It's an 8-hour class. And then, obviously, whenever there's a new law change, we get the updates from the Michigan State Police.
I was a police officer for 10 years. I policed both the city of Plymouth and the township. These are good, useful tools. It's not saying that some of the people's concerns here are not valid, because I think they are. And could someone take one of these ordinances improperly applied and run it all the way up to the Supreme Court and get a result that is where there is going to be an issue constitutional? I suppose that's possible. I don't think very many people have the wherewithal to do that. But usually, when you run into a situation like they did a couple years ago, the ACLU jumped on it in a heartbeat. And so, has the ACLU contacted us on any of these proposed ordinances? Has anyone been contacted by the ACLU? It's been out in the public domain for some time. So.
Okay, we're not interacting at this point.
Yeah, so. just that. What I would note that is that when there is something that seems to be a little questionable, citizens do call the ACLU and they get involved. So I'm just asking if anyone has been contacted by the ACLU on this.
Well,
so,
we wouldn't particularly want to invite the ACLU to get involved, I wouldn't think.
Well, just asking the question.
Yeah. I think that they would find these ordinances to be minor in nature and similar to probably hundreds of other jurisdictions around the state.
Most of them are public peace kind of ordinances that law enforcement officers deal with, and generally officers are called to that. They don't go around looking for this. They get a call on something, and I think there's enough specificity here. Although some of the complaints that I heard out there or issues are legitimate, I agree with that. But it seems to me that there's been enough prudence in reviewing these at this point.
Okay, any other questions or comments from the board?
Yes. PDF page 179, Kevin. I need a little understanding where it says corrective action means any of the following. Where does corrective, I can't find where does corrective action get used once it gets defined?
That would be in subsection D.
D, help me out, where is that?
With respect to the rebuttable presumption.
Page 80, 180.
Oh, let me see.
I just looked for the word corrective action in the
Right here.
verbiage, and I just wasn't able to find it.
Right here, defendant failed to take corrective action.
What page?
181.
D3.
83.
Oh, wait.
180.
180.
Section D3. So the defendant failed to take corrective action.
Defendant failed to take corrective action.
Which
All right.
meant any of these things. So the defendant didn't make the prop demand that the minor refrain
Or leave.
or leave, or make a prompt report of the unlawful possession or consumption.
Okay, anything else?
Want to postpone it? I move to postpone it so that you can clear up these. You have some minor typos you said you wanted to fix.
Motion has been made by Trustee Kermy to postpone so that we can make minor typos and revisions. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Motion's been made and seconded, so the motion before us is to postpone. A yes vote is to postpone. Mr. Clerk, please take the roll.
Supervisor Heisey?
No.
Treasurer Clinton?
No.
Trustee Kermy?
Yes.
Trustee Dorshevitz?
No.
Clerk Vorba? No. Trustee Dempsey?
Yes.
Trustee Heitman?
No.
Motion fails.
Okay. All right, any other comments or questions from the board at this point? We'll now open it up for public discussion. Again, please adhere to the 3-minute rule if you have any comments or questions on this particular item.
Could you speak it? Could you pick up? Could you turn the mic on?
My question pertains to the tobacco violation for young people. So I'm just reading over it. I'm not a specialist in addictions, but I'm questioning the penalty for young people. So you're going to have them, for the first violation, they're going to perform 16 hours of community service, possibly.
Sorry, which section number? I'll put it up on the screen.
Page 178, IA.
So it's for
178.
1A.
possession or use of tobacco, vapor products, or
Got it.
alternative nicotine.
It's on the screen.
Yeah, so I'm just questioning the efficacy of that kind of a treatment modality for young people who have an addiction to nicotine. So you are going to have them in a hospice working, a nursing home, and a long-term care facility. I'm just questioning if that's effective. You have a nicotine addiction, essentially, is what you're dealing with.
Well, maybe they can take care of people who are dying of cancer from years of smoking. So
Well, I'm a nurse.
worked
and
for
they're
me.
not all dying.
My father died of excessive smoking, and I don't smoke as a
That's
result.
not all the patients in hospice.
Okay, so
Right. I'm questioning.
you recommend another type of penalty?
I don't know what that would be.
Okay.
I would actually look into addiction studies to find out what would be efficacious in treating a young person with a nicotine addiction. That was my question.
But it says
because
the court may order, not the court shall order.
it's just on here, so it is an option. I'm just questioning whether it's an efficacious option or not.
Yeah, participate in the health promotion and risk reduction program.
May I answer that question through the chair?
Sure, Kevin.
Basically, that ordinance tracks MCL 722.642, which is the state law with respect to purchase or use of tobacco product by minors. It says for the first violation under that statute, a court may order the individual to do one of the following: perform not more than 16 hours of community service in a hospice, nursing home or long-term care facility, or 2, participate in a health promotion, and risk reduction program as described in this subsection.
Maybe that's why they said, they didn't just say community service, but they were specific, you know, for that exact reason.
I'm not saying it's a bad thing to do. I'm just saying I don't think how it's very efficacious at treating a nicotine addiction. That was my question.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
Mr. Bennett, what about the subsection 2 and 3 here? Is that also part of the state law?
Yes.
Any other questions or comments from the public?
Stand up.
Hi, my name is Brinton Baker, and I'm a Plymouth Township resident. I just wanted to make a couple comments here. One to start with is that this is Plymouth Township, not Canton, and we don't have Canton's problems. I don't think we need Canton's controls. It's a smaller town. I like the fact that it's a smaller town. I like the feeling of this town. I don't like the feeling of Canton. I don't live there. Let's keep it like this. A more relevant comparison would be Northville Township. Do they have an ordinance similar to this, in which case that would be interesting to bring that out. Second point I'd make is that this really seems overly broad. It depends a whole lot, as several folks have mentioned, it depends a whole lot on discretion. And I think Trustee Cormier mentioned a case a number of years ago that involved a church. Well, my question would be, were the officers at that time trained as they are now? Or has there been a substantial increase in training that would result in discretion being so much more properly applied? I don't know if you can answer now. Yes, I'd love to have an answer.
I'm actually the officer that was involved in that. So
Really? Oh, wonderful. Yes, very helpful.
To answer that, yes, we went to a class about peaceful picketing. We actually added it into our ordinance, and we all have a copy of it, most likely in their clipboard, so that if we do have somebody that's peacefully protesting, we make them follow. I think there's like 12 steps on it. So.
Well, good. I'm very glad to hear that. Yeah. It still leaves open the issue, though, of discretion. And our public servants are humans, and there's the opportunity for abuse. One last point then is what we're talking about here is a potential infringement on our personal freedoms. You talk about public, that our public speech will be, our freedom of speech will be protected. Whether we come down on the same side or on different sides, we all feel a need to protect these freedoms. I question the rush. Why is there a rush to push this through now? I'm not seeing, and maybe I'm out of the loop here, but I'm not seeing a sudden massive increase in crime in this township that's causing us to say, my God, let's rush this thing through now. Let's take the time to study this. Let's take the time to look at this, tighten things up a little bit. If teen parties are the issues, let's nail that down more precisely and make sure that we're not going after everyone else with a very broad brush. Okay? That's my only point. Thank you very much for your time.
Okay. Thank you. Anyone else from the audience?
So I like the point that the gentleman just made before me, and I have concern still with the statement of breach of peace, being that it states any person who shall make or assist in making any noise. And this isn't in a state statute, any noise. Can a line item be added possibly to state breach of peace shall not be applied or shall not include? And also citing the ordinance that was just mentioned here that says these certain things are allowed within this new ordinance. Also, with the proposal of the open house parties, when it states knowingly allow minors to have alcohol, this would have not applied to the party that had the 300 to 400 teens a couple years ago, because the owners, the adults, were not there and had they didn't know about this party. So there wouldn't be anyone to charge with this crime as it is written now. So how will this change things in the township when it is a bunch of teenagers that are getting together? Because this states it is for knowingly allowing a minor to have alcohol. Also, I'd like to request improved means of communicating new laws for consideration with township residents. We could use the township newsletter, email distributions, the Plymouth Township Facebook page, putting them on the township website on the main front page instead of having them buried 170 pages in a document that is unsearchable the way it is posted now. There are means to post documents that are in a format that can be searchable, easily searchable by residents, just by putting a word in and being able to find what you're looking for. And when you throw a 200-page document at us, a few days before a meeting, it hardly makes it available to residents to get a full grasp on things that are being considered in a couple days at the next meeting.
Thank you. Anyone else on this item? You're the zoning guy. Wait a minute.
This was interesting, so I
Oh,
have to make
okay.
a comment.
Jump in.
Attorney Bennett, you brought up a point about what happens in Oops, sorry about that. Is that better?
You can take it off the holder. Yeah.
So with regard to a violation of one of the ordinances that has not been adopted as a misdemeanor, if that activity occurs now, can you explain what the process is versus what I thought I heard you say, if there's a violation, we can keep it here as opposed to having something be moved downtown? Is there a difference in what would happen in the future versus what happened today?
For general information purposes, if the township has an ordinance, that would be, the township can enforce that ordinance in 35th District Court. If the township does not have an ordinance on something, then it would have to be prosecuted under state law. What I did is I basically went through the entire penal code and I looked for all the misdemeanors that were punishable by 90 or 93 days, which is all the township has jurisdiction to prosecute. There are certain misdemeanors that are 1-year misdemeanors or 2-year misdemeanors. The township does not have the power to prosecute those. So I picked the ones that the township did have the power to prosecute. I cross-referenced that with what the township has in place right now and added the ones that the township does not have in place right now. On top of that, I did some other things I was asked to do by the police department, specifically with respect to the open house party, and the breach of peace. With respect to the breach of peace, Northville's ordinance came up. I did look at Northville's ordinance and Canton's ordinance. I decided Canton's ordinance was more reasonable for purposes of Plymouth Township. I can read you the Northville ordinance if you'd like. It says, it shall be unlawful for any person to act in a violent, boisterous, turbulent, quarrelsome, indecent, or disorderly manner, or to use profane, obscene, or vulgar language, and this would be the part that this ordinance pertains to, or to disturb the good order, peace, and dignity of the township, its inhabitants, or persons. If you look at that with respect to the Canton Township ordinance, what's been looked at is a person who shall make or assist in making any noise. Well, the rest of the ordinance says, by which the peace and good order of the township are unreasonably disturbed. It doesn't mean you just have to make a noise. You have to cause an unreasonable disturbance to be a violation of the ordinance. With respect to processes of enforcement, I think I addressed this last time this came up, but a police officer has the power to do what's called a write and release which means would be to temporarily arrest a person and to issue a citation to that person if the offense is punishable by up to 93 days, and release that person without bringing them into custody and getting them before a magistrate for an arraignment. If the offense is punishable by up to 90 days, a police officer can arrest for a 93-day offense on probable cause. For a 90-day offense, a police officer can only arrest if he or she personally observes the violation. So if there's no personal observation of a 90-day offense, then that has to go to the prosecutor for a warrant request. This breach of peace provision is a 90-day offense, not a 93-day offense. So if the offense does not occur in the police officer's presence, it would have to come through my office for approval of the charge.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions from the audience? Well, let's see. Is there anybody different who wants a chance?
Get to the microphone.
Okay. As you read Northville's, the language is specific. It's specific. It's not broad.
No.
So maybe we could adopt a language into that breach of peace that actually has more specificity.
If you look at methods of statutory construction, this ordinance uses the disjunctive term or. So basically it has three possible violations: violent, boisterous, turbulent, quarrelsome conduct, profane, obscene, or vulgar language, that's component number 2, or component number 3, to disturb the good order, peace, and dignity of the township. Any one of those three, it does not require all three, any one of those three is sufficient for a violation of this ordinance.
I'm not saying adopt exactly what they have, but they are using very specific things that they are not going to allow.
She's never going to like it.
It's specific. We are not going to allow this. Where the one that is written for Plymouth Township is so broad. You don't even know what it says, let alone how it would be applied toward the public.
Just if I
mean, that's my interpretation.
Okay, well, just to answer that question, the third clause in the Northville Township ordinance says it's unlawful to disturb the good order, peace, and dignity of the township. That would be the provision. This specific breach of peace ordinance does not talk about profane, obscene, or vulgar language, which could have First Amendment issues. It does not talk about violent, boisterous, turbulent, quarrelsome, indecent, or disorderly manner. It's strictly limited to the third prong. And this specific ordinance is more detailed than the Northville ordinance because it requires peace and good order of the township be unreasonably disturbed. So I did look at all of these when I was drafting, and I was deciding, do I want to model this after Canton's or Northville's, and I looked at some other ones. I thought for purposes of what we have now and what would be effective going forward for purposes of prosecutions in the 35th District Court, this specific ordinance would be the one that would help. Again, as I stated, it could be used in a manner to violate a person's First Amendment rights, but if it comes across my desk, the Constitution of the United States has no greater proponent than me. I would not use it to violate somebody's constitutional rights.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else in the audience?
Get that last step out of you, Attorney Bennett. So if you can't prosecute for one of those alleged state misdemeanors, who does? And then what court is it heard in if it's not heard at the 35th under one of our three judges that know and understand our community?
Okay, if it's a misdemeanor punishable by, I think it's less than 2 years in prison, it would be handled locally. If it's a felony, it would go to Detroit. So misdemeanors under state law that the township cannot prosecute would be prosecuted by the Wayne County prosecutor if they chose to pursue the charges.
So to rephrase, make sure I got it right, if it's state law, but there's no local ordinance, we cannot prosecute it locally.
Yes.
Any other comments or questions from the board? For the board, sorry.
Yes.
No, go ahead.
Please.
again, Kimberly Baker, Plymouth Township resident. I would like to say that I think that we do here in Plymouth Township enjoy some reasonable personnel here in Plymouth Township.
Could you speak up, please?
Okay. I think that we are currently fortunate that we have a lot of reasonable people who are adjudicating our laws, who are making the laws, and who are enforcing the laws. I think that's a good thing, but that may not always be the case. We have seen a lot of tumultuous activity in our elections in recent years, and we can't always rely on that, which is why what is written in law is so very, very important. So I would like to ask this question. What is the urgency? Why can we not postpone this to a study session like we do with other proposed laws? What is the urgency that means this thing needs to be passed and codified tonight?
Just to answer that question, we have been working on this ordinance for probably a year, at least a year and a half, maybe more. This has been studied extensively by Kevin Bennett, working in conjunction with the police, and I think that what we've come up with tonight is a very reasonable approach to address a variety of mostly existing state laws that we can handle at the local level, where I frankly think where everybody will have a better shake and will get their day in court, literally. With respect to the process involved, we are completely following state law and Michigan Township Act with respect to the readings of this ordinance. This was brought to our last board meeting that for first reading. There was extensive discussion at that point. This is part of that process, so now we have second reading, and again, we've had more extensive discussion. So we are certainly in compliance with state law with respect to adoption of ordinances. Any other comments or questions from the board?
Plus,
or
we
for the
did,
public?
actually, this is second reading.
Yes, sir.
So we discussed this at length. When was it?
2 weeks ago.
Yeah.
I mean, it was at a
January
regular
8th,
meeting.
Yeah,
So.
yeah, January 8th.
I have a comment, but it would be, I guess, in the form of a request, which would be, if this is adopted, would it be, I think it would be useful, so I'm asking this in the form of a request. Could the township attorney and the police department come back to the board and therefore the public a year from now, no less than a year from now, and make a report and tell us what is the effect of this ordinance been?
That's a great
how many,
idea.
like how many cases were brought? Right. What kinds of cases? And we'll have the opportunity then for the public to look at that, have notice provided, and people who might think that it's not been done properly could make that point. So would that be something that we could request be done?
As supervisor, I could make that request of the police department.
I think that's a great idea.
Well, just remember one thing. You know, we're talking. Look at animal cruelty, which we haven't talked about today. Animal cruelty cases go to Detroit. They're immediately thrown off because they're animal cruelty cases, right? But today they do. Part of this ordinance is they come here. We come in and say we got 25 animal cruelty cases. How many did we have before? 0. Oh, wait, we have a problem. You guys are really abusing this new ordinance. I don't know how many other ones are like that. Certainly, Attorney Bennett could tell us, but that's one of those things that Detroit isn't going to prosecute, but the 35th District Court might.
You make an excellent point, Trustee Heitman. So I would hope that, Mr. Supervisor, when you make this request, that it would be in the nature of a substantive, qualitative report back, not just some statistics that could be interpreted in different ways, so that we get a value-added presentation with the public being able to look at that and question it and comment on it, so we can allay these concerns, which I think, as one of the commenters at least said, I think it arises because of the environment that we're in as a people, as a nation, where there's just this fundamental question about trust in government. So it's certainly understandable for people to come in and say, how's this going to work? Is this going to change the landscape here in this township? So I appreciate that you will make that request. I look forward to that report in a year, assuming that it is approved here tonight. Thanks.
Okay. Any other comments or questions from the public or from the board?
I just want to applaud the people for coming out and speaking on this. These are important fundamental issues, and I'm pleased that they did come forward and ask these very poignant and necessary questions.
Okay. I am looking for a motion.
I have a question for the attorney.
Okay.
Mr. Attorney, Mr. Bennett, if I read this resolution here, motion, and I add the technical points that a couple of people have brought up, changes, does that in any way change anything? Do we need to have another reading after that?
No, the substance is not changed. It would only be typographicals and formatting changes.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Do I hear a motion then, Mr. Clerk?
Yes, I'd like to make a motion.
Okay.
I move and approve Resolution 2019-01-2211, second reading, which includes the typographical issues brought up by the board, and authorization to publish the Charter Township of Plymouth Ordinance 1016, Amendment 22, Criminal Code Supplementation, and to make the ordinance effective January 24th, 2019.
Support. Motion's been made and supported by Clerk Vorba and Supervisor Heisey. Mr. Clerk, please take the roll.
Treasurer Clinton.
Yes.
Trustee Kermy.
No.
Trustee Dempsey.
No.
Trustee Dorshevitz.
Yes.
Supervisor Heisey.
Yes.
Trustee Heitman.
Yes.
Clerk Vorba, yes. Motion passed.
Thank you.
What did you vote, Mark?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Okay, that moves us on to supervisor and trustee comments. I'm going to go around the horn and start with Bob. You're good. Gary Heitman?
I echo Jerry's thanking the public for coming out and speaking out on this, and hopefully continue to keep an eye on us, and I appreciate that. Thank you.
Jerry?
I'm fine.
I do want to make a few comments about tonight's meeting. First of all, I want to thank the board for voting favorably for the golf course contract. This is something that's been in the works for many, many years. It's been a source of controversy in this township for a long time, and I think that we're about to embark now with a company that is aggressive, that's profit-oriented, and I think will do a great service for the township. And it will allow us to cut our costs, cut our losses, and actually engage in profit sharing for the first time, meaningful profit sharing with a golf course operator, and I think that's very important. The other thing I'd like to talk about or just mention tonight is the discussion that we've had on the Criminal Code of Ordinances. And while I do appreciate the fact that people come forward with questions and concerns, it is also a sign of our time, thanks to social media and Facebook and Nextdoor, that people will take items that are on this agenda and manipulate them into a political agenda that they have with this board. We have seen this time and time again with the public safety millage, with the park, with the golf course, and with a series of other items that usually result in robocalls. I guess we didn't get any robocalls tonight. But I would caution folks that while it's important to always be vigilant and to come to the board, and we encourage that with your comments and questions, please be mindful of where you're getting your information from. There is a lot of fake news out there. There's a lot of people who rush to judgment, and there's a lot of people with political agendas who will take and manipulate the agenda items, the statutes, and the ordinances that we're working on in a transparent and public fashion. And they will manipulate that to whip up people into thinking that things are happening that, in fact, are not happening. So we spent a lot of time tonight trying to answer those questions and tamp that down, but I am imploring the public, and you know who you are, I know you're watching tonight, put down the Facebook, put down the next door, and start being straight with the public. Stop manipulating the information that is coming out of this building for your own narrow, failed political agendas. Thank you.
I'm all set.
No comments. Nothing. I'm sorry, beg your pardon. You have something to say?
No, he's good. He's good. I need a motion to adjourn.
I'll make something up.
Oh, we have more? Oh, that's right. I'm so sorry. That's right. I'm sorry. Go ahead. Public comment.
I'd like to thank the trustees for a great meeting. A lot of what you said, Mr. Heisey, just resonated. There were options. Do you go to news? Do you do Facebook? Trying to keep it professional, and that really resonated with me, what you just said. Also, looking forward to the golf course, that one that runs along the road, the dirt road. I got an eagle on that with my kid, and it was far enough away to be a hole-in-one in my book, and that was a great memory. Looking forward to more stuff at the golf course. Thanks for listening on the cluster housing. I don't know how you read all this stuff. There's a lot of stuff. I emailed everyone a spreadsheet. I've researched 20, 25 communities on cluster housing. I don't know if I'm allowed to give printouts. It's what I emailed. I have them. I'm going to look again at Wixom, because you mentioned looking at other cities. Wixom is the only one I could find with a bonus, 25%. Their cluster housing ordinances are the longest and the freshest, and I don't remember them all, but I'd like to look in them again and maybe consider sending it to you. I know everyone's master plan is different. I'm going to look at it again. If there's any other city you want me to research, I'm happy to do it. I look from here to Bozeman, Utah. I can't find unlimited density bonus. So again, thank you for listening and thank you for researching it.
And just don't give us street repairs under community chest.
I was going to pull a chance card for you. It said you've been elected to the board of trustees. You got to pay everyone $20.
Oh, no.
I thought you wouldn't like that one.
And also, too, we're going to be meeting. You and I are going to be meeting in the next, hopefully, the next couple days with Laura Haw and maybe even Brian Amon. I don't know. I mean, we'll offer it to him.
Thank you for, doing the right thing. I think that church reached out to us before. I wasn't there. My wife said they weren't treated very nicely, and no one wanted to listen. And I don't know who was at that meeting, but she went up to them and apologized and said, listen, I'm embarrassed for how you were treated reaching out to us. We're neighbors. Let's be neighborly.
Are you talking recently or when we had the road issue?
Oh, no, within the last year, they came to us and said, oh, yeah, I guess of the road. They wanted a road.
The one they wanted the road onto Ridge Road?
And you talk about Facebook and fake news. People made it sound like that road was going to go, all over that vacant land. You're right about fake news. I get it. I wish I would have went to that. I saw the drawing just recently. It's not the way I saw it on Facebook.
Right. Thank you. Yeah. Hello again.
Hello. Real briefly, with regard to 2019, we've tabled that for February 7th, or you've tabled it for February 7th.
February 5th.
5th, sorry, I apologize. With regard to the application, then, because that amendment was embedded in the application, where, just logistically, so I understand and can speak to it intelligently, where does that stand then?
Well, it's been effectively tabled until we have our study session.
Okay.
So no action will be taken. There's nothing for us to do until we talk about it again. Am I right, Kevin?
Okay.
Is that a yes?
Is there a proposed date for that application to be addressed, or is that part of the February 5th meeting?
You're talking about the specific
There's two different things.
cluster housing options being proposed for the property?
Correct, which was in the application was embedded the amendment. So I know the amendment is being tabled at the 7th, but what's going on with the application?
Can Mr. Dorshevitz answer that, because you were at the Planning Commission meeting.
Okay, all right.
Just to clarify, there has not been any formal site plan or anything that has been submitted to the township. They are just trying to get clarification on the cluster housing option and what the densities are going to be allowed in the future, depending on your various zoning areas. We took the opportunity to then amend the current, or to do the text amendment to, again, arguably to strengthen the existing language. And you could argue that we're making it more difficult to do cluster housing because we've imposed a lot of new requirements and restrictions. So again, that's one guy's opinion. Your results may vary, but I know the issue here is the density that's contemplated for this project. And this is again, he's just submitted a piece of paper right now. It's not a formal site plan. It's not a formal application or anything like that.
Okay, thank you.
Could I just make a comment, which is, since I won't be able to be at the study session, I think it would be very useful if the way this is discussed, comments are offered, relate A, to the density issue, and B, to anything else that's proposed to be changed, to try to separate those two, because I think, Mr. Supervisor, as you've indicated, there's some real good strengthening and improvements in the rest of the language that the Planning Commission has recommended we approve. So if there's a separation, I think that would be very useful to consideration of this and public understanding. Thanks.
Okay. I will let Laura know and Kevin. Are we all set now? Any other comments?
I have a estimate from a contractor to repair damages that were caused by a contractor that was hired for road replacement in our subdivision under the SAD that Plymouth Township had administered. It has been acknowledged that the contractor did damage the lines, and our investigation into why our lights weren't working at the entrance revealed that the repair was poorly done. So now we have close to $5,000 in costs to replace this electrical line so we can have a street light at our entrance again. I am submitting this on behalf of our subdivision HOA for consideration and review by the board.
Are you an officer of the HOA?
Yes.
In what capacity?
Co-vice president.
You're the co-vice president. Okay. We'll be happy to take that up tonight, and we'll share it with Mr. Felrath. And I do not know who the contractors were on that particular project, if that was, or the engineers for that matter. But we will.
It was a weight trim project, right?
I don't.
OHM.
OHM?
It was OHM.
And do we have money left over in their bond?
What project was it?
Country Club Village.
Right. But this is a specific issue with electrical facilities? Is that?
A broken electrical line that was poorly repaired, and it failed.
This is the street light that is over the entrance that is
It's at
15
the entrance
feet tall?
of Powell and Fellows Hill Drive.
Okay, we'll take a look at it.
And then I have one last comment. In regards to this new criminal code that was discussed tonight and 2 weeks ago, I am trying to stay as informed in the township as possible, and it's hard for me and others to stay informed because of time constrictions with how quickly things are posted, reviewed, and approved. The residents are not given enough time or even notice that new things like this are coming up. So yes, I use Facebook, I use Nextdoor, I do try and inform others. And the vagueness of this ordinance provided the fuel for discussions on these topics. And I find it offensive that I'm accused, or others are accused, of using Nextdoor and Facebook to to spread lies. We have questions. We deserve to be answered, and we deserve to have transparent government. And when something is thrown out and passed in 2.5 weeks, that is not considered transparent.
Okay, your time is up.
Thank you.
And let me just say for the record again that we are following state law completely. It's the exact same state law that was used by the former township clerk when she did ordinances as well, except for the one where she tried to ban free speech on the internet. But we won't talk about that anymore. Anything else? I'm looking for a motion to adjourn. Mr. Heitman? Motion made by Trustee Heitman. Is there a second? Second by Clerk Vorba. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.